Good morning and welcome to SCBIO's 2021 annual meeting. I'm Caroline Brown, Chief External Affairs Officer at the Medical University of South Carolina, an SCBIO board member and your 2021 conference chair.
And I'm Morgan Nichols, Corporate Affairs and Investor Relations Manager here at SCBIO.
Today, we're delighted to be here at the beautiful Gilliard Center in Charleston, celebrating the power of us, a highly appropriate theme for this annual meeting. You know, the past 11 months have brought a lot of challenges: a global pandemic, the need for a renewed commitment to end systemic racism, and a call to remain committed to the democratic values of our country. I especially love this year's theme of the power of us, because it's up to us to work together to make the world, the country, and our state a safer and healthier place to live, work, and play for everyone. So given the current status of the pandemic in South Carolina, unfortunately we aren't together in person today, but we're so glad to be connecting with you. As you might imagine, we had a ton of different scenarios planned after postponing our conference originally scheduled for last October. In the end, for everyone's safety, our best option was to meet virtually like this.
And we have a great program planned for you. You'll hear from top executives at Microsoft and Verily about the power of innovation and how it is changing our industry around the globe. Then the National Bio Organization's president discusses the power of people and the critical role that equity, diversity, and inclusion play in achieving a healthier and better world. Finally, state and national leaders will share how the power of partnerships are reinventing and advancing our industry to new and unprecedented levels.
And now, more than ever, the power of us, all of us, is essential in providing the strength and knowledge to get through this global pandemic. I have marveled at the clinicians, nurses, frontline workers, their bravery and relentless spirit in treating COVID-19 patients, and we thank all of you who have played and continue to play a role in helping us defeat COVID-19.
And it's really been amazing to see all of the stories of triumph, even as we remember the people we've lost to COVID-19. While life will never be the same, we will persevere. And a lot of thanks goes out to the life sciences industry right here in South Carolina. So today, our focus is on the power of us, all the things that we can do together to grow this industry in our state. And I'm looking forward to a jam-packed morning of interesting and entertaining sessions.
Me too, Morgan. And now, before we move into the State of the Industry address, let's enjoy this message from a very special guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to add my welcome to you for the SCBIO 2021. The life science industry is vitally important to South Carolina and to our future. And I remember back when I was Attorney General and the Life Science Act was enacted into law and challenged in court as being unconstitutional, and we defended it and won. And I think everyone back then and before knew that this was the way to the future. And it certainly has turned out that way now, with billions of dollars in economic impact, with hundreds of firms and thousands of people working. I think it's the life science industry that is really leading us into the future, and it is a glorious future for South Carolina. So I want to thank you all for being here, for working hard, and I say again, as you know, the best is yet to come. Thank you.
And now, before SCBIO CEO Sam Konduras shares his State of the Industry address in just a couple minutes, Morgan will share some insights to help you make the most of your morning.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm backstage here at the Galliard and can't wait for you all to see what we have planned for today. I've had the honor of speaking with many of you leading up to today's conference and would like to thank our investors and our members, including our presenting and champion sponsors, Vicor Scientific and Nephron Pharmaceuticals. Now, this won't be your normal Zoom meeting, so let's take some time to go over all of the features to how you can engage virtually with attendees so that you really feel the power of us. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the virtual attendee hub on your app or desktop to connect with us at SCBIO and other attendees. We will also be utilizing the chat and Q&A function on your screen. Let's take a second and try it out now. Let us know where you are watching from today. We appreciate all of you for tuning in from across South Carolina and beyond. Let's also take a look at our schedule. We will have a 15-minute break at around 10:15 or so. We encourage you to use this time to visit our virtual exhibit hall, fill those coffee cups, and stretch your legs. In addition to the keynotes, you won't want to miss the awards segment and special tribute to our healthcare and company heroes that continue to work to battle COVID-19. I'll share more about our virtual attendee hub later, and I hope you've taken the time to fill out your profile and schedule time to meet with other life sciences executives tomorrow. Throughout the morning, if you have a question, be sure to contact myself or another member of the SCBIO team by hitting the Contact Us button or head to the SCBIO help desk in the virtual exhibit hall. Now we're ready to get this show started. SCBIO's CEO is taking the stage to deliver his State of the Life Sciences industry message. Sam?
Thank you, Morgan, and hello, everyone. This mask and the emptiness of this beautiful performance hall tells a story we wouldn't have believed a year ago. It symbolically conveys what we've all been through together over the past 12 months, and that we still have miles to go with this brutal pandemic. But the conference must go on. Our mission is strong, and SCBIO is here to deliver. So join us. COVID-19 has changed almost everything about life as we know it, and this virus will continue to bear down on us for some time to come as we all slowly but surely get vaccinated and continue to do what we do best as Americans: adapt, innovate, create solutions, and courageously fix our eyes on a brighter horizon that we know we must work tirelessly and with God's help to make a reality. With this beautiful backdrop, though, I have the unique privilege of presenting SCBIO's State of the Industry during this 2021 virtual annual meeting, presented by Vicor Scientific and championed by Nephron Pharmaceuticals. Our extraordinary life sciences industry is in the forefront like never before, and will continue to play an enormous role in leading the world out of this crisis, shoulder to shoulder with real healthcare heroes. As we continue forward in a perfect storm comprised of an unmerciful pandemic, a challenging social justice movement, and painful political turmoil and upheaval, we must continue to grapple with these inescapable issues and challenges. Winston Churchill said, "You can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else." And I take some comfort in that insightful, hopeful, and irreverently humorous statement. Our tagline, "The Power of Us," recognizes that we're all having to shoulder this difficult season together, but we're up for it, partly because we have no choice, and we're fully capable because together we're unstoppable. And that is the power of us. This poignant theme for this most unusual annual meeting that SCBIO has ever had the privilege of mounting. Heartfelt thanks to all of you for joining us today. For months, we'd been looking forward to taking the stage in this spectacular Gaillard Center in the heart of iconic Charleston, but not exactly like this. I'm grateful for my industrious and tech-savvy team and the power of technology that is allowing us to pull this off virtually, but I deeply wish we could see all of you in person today. We miss you. But this too will change, and God willing, we'll all be back here together a year from now, and this beautiful but empty hall will be crackling with energy that all of you uniquely bring. Please take a moment to absorb the power of this simple image that conveys the logos of SCBIO's record-breaking number of investors. Today is a celebration of all of you. And despite this formidable pandemic, which caused all of us to pivot in unimaginable ways, I want to thank you for the most successful financial year in SCBIO history. Every single one of our financial metrics exceeded projections with positive variances, some quite dramatic, including our strongest liquidity position in organizational history and a surge of new investors that increased membership revenue by over $200,000, all during a pandemic no less. This is astonishing and due to all of you. Before I reflect on the past year, which is highlighted in our newly published annual report, and chart crucial data points and priorities set forth in our hot-off-the-press 3rd edition South Carolina Life Sciences Strategic Plan, I'll first go deeper into the COVID effect because it has impacted almost everything. At present, we continue on a trajectory that will likely reach 80 million documented cases of the COVID-19 virus globally, and tragically, worldwide deaths exceeding 2 million. With healthcare systems pushed to the brink, along with the heroic healthcare employees doing their utmost to care for us. COVID-19 also delivered a roughly $9 trillion hit to the global economy, with devastating job losses and layoffs for millions. and industries ranging from retail to airlines having to withstand crushing blows, and an estimated 23% plunge in global trade accompanied by unprecedented manufacturing and supply chain disruptions. As our industry sprinted to find a cure for COVID-19, executive attention shifted from normal business to crisis management. McKinsey reported in August 2020 that corporate leaders spent 80% of their time managing the crisis and protecting employees from its spread, not shaping the strategies and paths forward for their business future. That's a lot of time lost and quite a price to pay. To again quote Churchill, he said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." And that's what we've been doing and will continue to do. He also said that out of intense complexities, intense simplicities emerge. And our collective focus on how to recalibrate our business missions and personal lives became the top priority at the devastating outset of the pandemic lockdown in early March. In the weeks that ensued, over 100 South Carolina life science companies valiantly stepped up to develop unique solutions to deal with the fallout of COVID-19. And as our industry took center stage, so did SCBIO. Our unexpected pivot included working with amazing state partners to quickly build an online emergency supplies portal in only a matter of days as needs for PPE were beyond urgent. We also created a South Carolina Life Sciences job board and careers portal that remains one of the most dynamic components of our website and will be a permanent fixture. We interfaced with elected officials and agencies, forging much deeper relationships, fueled by an extraordinary SCBIO webinar series which featured top national and state officials. And with science as SCBIO's guide, we led an aggressive mask-wearing campaign on social media while concurrently expanding our communication channels like never before. RSM Chief Economist Joe Brusuelas accurately stated, "No vaccine, no recovery." And it was clear that life sciences had emerged as one of the most profound silver linings in this unimagined landscape. Gratefully, that desired recovery is underway with the most rapid development of new vaccines in history. According to Straits Research, life sciences innovation, discoveries, and investments in next-generation medicines and therapeutics have never been more important than now, with investors witnessing in real time the actual value of creating life-saving therapies. The coronavirus pandemic has ignited a spark on how the life science industry shields the world, and while a lot of uncertainty regarding market performance remains, there will be a huge demand and appetite for investments in the life sciences industry in the months ahead as markets become steadier and the world starts moving forward. With biopharma companies generating billions in public and private transactions, even during rock-bottom market downturns in early 2020, the number of drugs and treatments in the pipeline have increased significantly, and prominent VC firms have announced plans to invest billions in biotech companies. Manufacturing and supply chain disruption represents an industry opportunity to re-examine our current approaches and diversify. This can create significant opportunities in industry-friendly U.S. locations like South Carolina, as past dependencies on foreign producers are seen as both an economic concern and a national security issue. Expect aggressive, long-term efforts to shore up and diversify supply chains and to return biopharma and API production to American soil, along with growth in medical devices and PPE. Building on that is the disruption to the import and export of pharmaceuticals more broadly, as well as the supply of active ingredients. The warning signals have gone off, particularly in America, over our excessive dependence on foreign suppliers, with over 90% of API, pharmaceuticals, vitamin C, antibiotics, and PPE produced offshore. Unprecedented efforts to encourage and incentivize repatriation is receiving direct support from the federal government, with a surge of new funding strategies and mechanisms through a vast array of federal agencies, including the Department of Defense, HHS, BARDA, and the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. SCBIO is in direct contact with all the above, and these strategies will be foundational to a newly launched Economic Development Task Force. It is also clear that increased utilization of digital technologies are here to stay, and acceptance is soaring, with digital health expected to increase nearly 6 times in size by 2026 to $639 billion. Telemedicine projected to grow to $175 billion, and the global market for telehealth apps, health analytics, and digital health systems is projected to exceed $500 billion. Wow. Under this backdrop, a commitment to intelligent collaborations, the power of us, will be key to the continued rise of our Palmetto State's life sciences industry. To emerge from the global crisis, South Carolina organizations will need to collaborate in new and more impactful ways as they stabilize, reconfigure, and transform. COVID-19 has had a seismic impact on our world and the life sciences industry, with long-term implications for how we work, how care is given, how products are developed and distributed, where ingredients come from, and how our ecosystem operates. But it has also made us stronger and has catalyzed opportunities for growth in South Carolina. Life sciences remains the fastest growing segment of South Carolina's innovation economy, and our ongoing research efforts now stunningly reveal over 800 life science firms or related companies in the state, a huge increase from the 2017 count of 425. And numerous and diverse new life science industries and firms have joined forces with SCBIO for the first time. Based on our ongoing commitment to be one of America's top-tier life sciences economic development organizations, over 60 engagement meetings with existing industries representing every sector of life sciences have been undertaken by Team SCBIO since 2019, and you can expect that commitment to grow. SCBIO will maintain a vital role as a facilitator, troubleshooter, and remover of obstacles whenever possible for our dynamic and diverse companies, and this has taken many forms over the past year. A key example is legislation crafted and introduced in the 2021 legislative session in partnership with the South Carolina Research Authority to address the franchise tax corporate license fee issue, which has financially penalized South Carolina early-stage innovation companies in the life sciences and technology space that have successfully raised venture capital prior to commercialization. And no role we play is more important than convening and connecting our companies with each other. And dynamic win-win relationships continue to be forged almost daily. And no aspect of our work program is more critically important than SCBIO's Life Sciences Talent Initiative, which continued at full force and even expanded during the pandemic, involving over 100 educators and industry leaders, workforce experts, and a record number of SCBIO student members who interact in dynamic engagement sessions designed to put them in direct conversation with corporate employers. And with regard to SCBIO's surging roster of four-year colleges and research university partners, the goal is to prepare and support the myriad of talented students seeking careers in the life sciences, specifically in the Palmetto State, and to tap into the extraordinary research capabilities of these powerful institutions. And gratefully, new industry recruitment efforts are surging, with the largest ever number of active leads, prospects, and projects to support, accelerated by the SCBIO-driven Reshoring Economic Development Task Force and further supported by our Industry and Innovation Council. The new task force is particularly focusing on engaging federal agencies and capital attraction partners, leveraging opportunity zones and new market tax credits, life science-ready real estate offerings, and the creation of expansion of new life science industry campuses and innovation districts in every region of the state. Executing virtual business development and recruitment strategies utilizing lead generation firms and research capabilities, and leveraging a powerful array of state, national, and global strategic relationships while actively implementing onshoring and supply chain disruption opportunities with specific focus on American companies manufacturing in foreign markets, especially China and India, global companies that are positioned to serve the North American market from South Carolina, FDA approval being the gold standard and a magnet for international life science companies, and strengthening the successful international landing pad program in tandem with commerce in our regions with even greater focus on FDA navigation, reimbursement strategies, clinical trial support, and creative funding mechanisms. We will continue our tech-based economic development competitiveness initiative as we pursue knowledge economy objectives, and we will strive to expand opportunities for early-stage life science companies leveraging a wide array of public-private collaborators and partners. While virtual strategies will have to continue for the foreseeable future, it is hoped that both domestic and international economic development missions can safely recommence at some point in 2021, and our budget reflects that accordingly. Additionally, countless hours are being devoted to what could become the largest life sciences R&D and advanced manufacturing project in South Carolina history. This is being done in close coordination with company principals and key economic development partners. This unique project, if successful, represents our progression to the next level of development in the life sciences arena and would be a true game changer for South Carolina's life sciences ecosystem. Growing our own South Carolina life science companies remains more important than ever. To that end, a new SCBIO innovation platform has been launched to round out our economic development capabilities with the able commitment of a dedicated SCBIO bioengineer staff champion and exceptional partners ranging from the Global Center for Medical Innovations to the South Carolina Hospital Association. This platform is designed to serve as a vital support system to move novel healthcare technologies forward that can solve problems more effectively and at a lower cost, with a particular focus on underrepresented minority populations. Finally, it is important for SCBIO to promote and ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion with a multifaceted and highly specific plan of attack, including awareness and education, talent integration, targeted innovation initiatives, industry strategies, and a specific board development strategy to achieve greater diversity on SCBIO's board with the goal of better reflecting the overall state population and demographics. In 6 months, that effort has already resulted in increasing the number of underrepresented minority board representatives from 1 to 4 and the number of executive committee members from 1 to 3. In addition to the numerous areas already highlighted, there have been many other strategic endeavors, initiatives, and organizational accomplishments, ranging from the establishment of a leading-edge SCBIO Charleston office presence at the West Edge Life Science Campus in the Charleston Medical Innovation District, to SCBIO's active participation on multiple boards of directors and strategic task forces, along with deepening our partnerships with exceptional national affiliate organizations such as BIO, Pharma, and AdvaMed, all while undertaking significant research endeavors in our evolution as a key industry data hub and even being a finalist for a major EDA grant opportunity. We've been busy. In closing, never before has SCBIO been better positioned to build, advance, innovate, and grow South Carolina's life sciences industry and ecosystem. And the words utilized in that overarching mission have never had more meaning as you see them defined in a new and more impactful way in this accompanying graphic. South Carolina's life science industry is diverse, dynamic, and thriving. It spans globally known medical device organizations and international pharmaceutical manufacturers, encompasses esteemed research organizations, testing and medical lab operators, alongside acclaimed bioscience packaging and distribution, boasts emerging powerhouses in health IT as well as industrial bioag. The industry includes organizations small and large, from startups and early-stage innovation companies to mature global players, focused on everything from respiratory therapies and diagnostics and digital health to internationally recognized research universities and nationally ranked healthcare systems featuring some of America's finest and most inventive minds. Serving as its foundation are the 800-plus firms referenced earlier, distributed across 42 of our 46 counties, a compelling data point that demonstrates life sciences deepening penetration, contribution, and needed diversification of our state's economy. We have an awesome team with growing expertise in bioengineering, microbiology, and genetics, as well as business development, marketing, public policy, and economic development, and our world-class board of directors for both our C6 and foundation organizations are strategic and supportive, empowering us to pursue bold goals and objectives that could actually redefine our evolving organization in 2021 as we take courageous steps forward in core mission areas of economic development, innovation, and social responsibility. Writer Megan O'Neill aptly stated that great things never come from comfort zones, and your comfort zone may be the most dangerous place to live, because in the safety of our comfort zones, we get complacent, sacrificing the ability to impact our world. Well, the power of us is actually the power of all of you with us, and we will make an impact. And we couldn't possibly be where we are today without your profound support, expertise, guidance, and encouragement. And for that, we're beyond grateful. Thank you for giving me the privilege of serving as your president and CEO of SCBIO. I'm truly passionate about this mission, and because of all of you and this incredible state that we love and represent, I know that the possibilities and opportunities are endless, and the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Our industry has been on the front lines in battling the global COVID-19 pandemic. In honor of all those affected adversely, and in memory of the precious lives we've lost, join us in a moment of silence to honor them now.
I have the great honor of welcoming you as the board chair of SCBIO to our virtual event. And let's be clear, it's the power of us. We want to talk about this entire event, the power of us and what we can do together. And on that note, I'd like to mention how remarkably proud I am of our industry. Both the medical device world as well as the drug and pharma side of things, we've done amazing things during this pandemic to really take care of us, to take care of patients who have needs, patients with symptoms, and also what can we do with other industries, for example, to come together, learn from the pharma world, learn from the device world, and be able to help patients. Let's think about how GE started making ventilators when that really wasn't their book of business, and other companies across the country and the world really coming together to join hands, join all of us in making things better for our patients. I would like to say that I have been 100% moved by the ability that we have with one another to work together here in South Carolina. So the membership of SCBIO is strong. We've grown by at least a couple hundred companies in the last year or so. We've joined together to put together partnerships that really have benefited all of us. So I can speak for Nephron Pharmaceuticals and our company to say that we have 4 partnerships going on right now with other members of SCBIO. I'm excited to say that we have joined forces in many ways with companies like Vicor Scientific. I've watched their growth over this last year and I'm proud of what they're doing. We've been able to watch what the Z Shield folks are doing. John Carrington leading the way for that company. We've watched as Vitalink has really been able to do a lot of the clinical trial work for all of the vaccine companies right here in South Carolina. We enjoy working with AVX and what they're doing there in Fountain Inn, South Carolina, to lead a global effort to do what's right for patients around the world. There's so many great examples of what's going on in our membership and the companies here in South Carolina. I'm happy to be a part of that. I'm happy to work alongside all of you doing great things in the pharma and device world and all of healthcare, life sciences. We've watched Thornton Kirby take a great lead in how he's mentored and helped the hospital association to do the right thing in our vaccine distribution and other things around the COVID pandemic. So for all of those reasons and many, many more, welcome to our virtual event being hosted with the Gaillard Center in our backdrop. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of that. I enjoy working every day with Sam, Aaron, Sam Patrick, Morgan, and the rest of the SCBIO team. It's a great time to celebrate our industry and what we can do for patients, solving healthcare issues throughout the state and beyond. Welcome to the virtual SCBIO Power of Us conference this year in 2021.
Hello, SCBIO. I want to say thank you all for your life-changing work. A silver lining of the COVID-19 pandemic is that it highlighted the importance of a strong American supply chain. It's why I introduced my Made in America Act. It would incentivize pharmaceutical, medical device, and PPE manufacturing in opportunity zones, more importantly, in America. We must keep America healthy. I will continue to fight for our country to have greater independence in production of vital life science products and ingredients. I hope to see you all very soon and, frankly, in person. Have a great conference.
Creativity is thinking up new things. Innovation is doing new things. This is a quote from the late Theodore Levitt, renowned economist and Harvard Business School professor. I'm John Osborne, managing partner at Good Growth Capital based in Charleston. Innovation is at the forefront of our industry, and doing new things has catapulted us into areas much faster than anticipated. According to a poll by the World Economic Forum, More than 90% of healthcare executives believe COVID-19 will fundamentally change their businesses, and 85% predict lasting changes in customers' preferences. Among healthcare leaders, 2/3 expect this period to be the most challenging in their career. Digital transformation will continue to be an important part of this evolving system. Caroline Brown, Chief External Affairs Officer at MUSC, will moderate our first keynote discussion focused on the power of digital innovation and its impact on our healthcare delivery. Joining Caroline will be Jamie Harper, Vice President of U.S. Education at Microsoft, Bill Stanlander, Commercial Lead at Verily Life Sciences, a Google company, and MUSC Health CEO, Dr. Pat Cawley.
Thank you so much, John, for teeing up this session perfectly. I'm Caroline Brown, Chief External Affairs Officer at MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina. I also happen to be an SCBIO board member, the conference chair this year, and the moderator for our session called The Power of Innovation, which is presented by MedPoint today. Before we kick off, we want to express our gratitude to our sponsor for this segment. As conference chair, I'm especially grateful for all of our industry partners who have made today's event possible. Since 2002, MedPoint has been providing regulatory and clinical affairs consulting and training across the globe. In fact, more than 90 countries where they serve. They mainly serve medical device, biotech, and pharma industries and provide consulting on clinical trials, audit practices, ensuring quality management systems, and other regulations. So just remember, if you have any needs in the regulatory and clinical affairs consulting realm, please check out medpoint.com. I'm looking forward to a fantastic discussion today with our keynote panel, and I'm really going to let our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their organizations, so I'll keep my introductions especially brief. I am thrilled to have with us today Bill Statlander, Commercial Lead at Verily, which is an Alphabet and Google subsidiary, Jamie Harper, Vice President for Microsoft, and Dr. Patrick Cawley, our Health System CEO at MUSC. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be with SCBIO today and to discuss the power of innovation. And more specifically, we're going to delve into digital transformation. So without further ado, I'd love to kick us off. We want to hear a little bit more about each of you and your organization. And just to make it a little more personal, I'd love for each of you to end with one thing that you like doing when you're not leading your organizations in digital transformation. So Dr. Cawley, let's start with you.
All right. Thanks, Caroline. I really look forward to this conversation today. As Caroline said, Pat Cawley, I'm CEO of the Health System here at the Medical University of South Carolina. We are a traditional academic health system, which means that we have a heavy reliance on our academic partners, but we also have some community components as well to our health system, which spans the entire state of South Carolina. What do I like to do? Well, if you look over my shoulder there, you'll see a sailboat, and I just love to have the wind going through my hair. So that's what I like to do when I have time off, but there's not been a lot of that in the past year.
Yeah, no kidding. Great. Well, thanks for being with us, Dr. Cawley. Bill, how about you next?
Sure. Thanks, Caroline. And I'm really excited to be part of this this panel today, and hopefully I can share some interesting insights. So my name is Bill Statlander. I'm the commercial lead for Verily Life Sciences. Verily is a subsidiary of Alphabet, which is a Google sister company. And we used to be called Google Life Sciences before we rebranded. We're about 5 years old at this point and have raised over $2.5 billion in funding and have over 1,000 employees. So we're taking on some really challenging, and transformative things in the healthcare industry. And we're really set up around three big areas. One is around healthcare delivery. So we partner with health systems and employers and payers providers to provide solutions around health and wellness and care delivery. We also have another group that partners with life sciences companies to develop new and innovative technologies. around wearables, sensors, some molecular things. And then we also have a division that is focused around clinical research and using digital tools around that called Baseline. I have been in the industry for about 20 years at this point, with some big companies like Boston Scientific and McKinsey & Company, and then I also have worked for some small startups as well. And outside of work, I really enjoy being a father to 3 kids, spend a lot of time with them. And this past year, we've all been in the same home, all doing studying and working. So I've gotten a chance to see them a lot more and spend more time with them.
That's fantastic. If there are silver linings of the pandemic, I think more time with family has definitely been one. Thanks for sharing. Jamie, let's go to you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Also very excited to be part of the discussion today. A little bit about me. My name is Jamie Harper. I lead the Microsoft education business across the U.S. And I spent a lot of time actually before in this role overseas in Singapore and also South Africa. I'm a proud alumni of Clemson University, where I have a degree in engineering. And I guess one of the things that is very interesting in the education space is we span the 15,000 school districts in the country, all the way to the thousands of colleges and research universities, including all the academic medical centers in the country. So it's been a very, very interesting and challenging year, certainly in the country. And as Bill said, I'm the father of 3 teenagers who are all virtual schooling. So in my spare time, I am the internet help desk for the Harper House to make sure everything's up and running and smooth. So looking forward to everything being seamless today.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks again for all of you being with us. I'm really excited that we have representation from industry and a provider organization, but also each of you represent kind of education, research, and patient care, all of which are extremely relevant to our entire audience today. So we want to talk a little bit about digital transformation and what that term means and where we think things are headed. So maybe we'll start with you, Jamie, and just ask you to use your crystal ball and give us an example of how digital transformation will change your industry in the future.
Yeah, I think the education industry has been, dramatically impacted, certainly in the past year. And there are, as you mentioned, there are some silver linings. And so one of the things as we look forward, we are collecting a lot of information. The amount of technology we had, and we've used this term, there's been more transformation really in the first 2 months of COVID than I think the education industry saw in 2 years prior. And so as you look forward, we certainly think for a portion of the population is really going to benefit from all these different systems. So you can imagine all these systems be able to be customized to truly have some more personalized learning. And imagine what that could do to things like our progress on things like algebra and literacy, and be able to kind of tailor individual courses, individual assignments to students, which now will have a lot more devices and a lot more technology, in their hands. So I think for a big portion of the population, we're going to see a lot more improvements in the coming years who really did modernize and kind of took advantage of that transformation opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. It's kind of a mandate now. We've all been forced to innovate in maybe ways we were resistant to previously. Dr. Colley, what does digital transformation mean to you and as a physician and also the leader of a health system?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. For the past couple of years, I've made this a focus for our leadership team, and we've really been working on this. It's not an intuitive definition to all. I think if people didn't study it, they immediately go to and say, oh, that's just new technology and things that come along. But it's really much, much more than that. Digital transformation is a fundamental change in business practices and operations as the result of new digital technologies being available and introduced into that business. Now, that's a mouthful, but basically what that means is we're going to change the way we deliver business. In healthcare, And on the clinical side, it's basically how we deliver care to patients. So it's going to change many, many things, but it's done through these technologies. And, there's been digital transformation over the last 30 years in certain industries, and it's crept a little bit into healthcare, but these technologies are much more widely available. They're a lot less expensive than they were. And I think when you put all of those together, I think it's going to completely, fundamentally change where healthcare is going in the next 10 years, and hopefully something that patients are going to enjoy even more. I often give the example that we do well with patient satisfaction here at MUSC, but if you compare patient satisfaction, and we're a high performer, but you compare us to other industries, it's mediocre at best. We've heard other leaders often call it the cream of the crop. That's where that we at MUSC are doing great across all of healthcare, but we have so much further to go in terms of other industries. So I personally think it's going to completely upend the way we do business and what people expect from healthcare going into the future.
Great. Well, as a patient and a healthcare executive myself, I mean, even simple things like self-scheduling, right? I mean, the way in which I can go online and pick a seat on an airplane. How do we make sure that we're more consumer-centric going forward? Bill, what about in your world? With your crystal ball, where do you see digital transformation taking Verily and having the largest impact in the life sciences?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for Verily, really what our mission is taking the health information that's out there and making it useful to improve patients' lives. I mean, that's kind of at the heart of it. And if you look at what Google has been able to do with Google Search and with Google Maps, of taking a lot of data that's out there and making it useful and having it as part of people's lives, and making, and Carolyn, to your point, of just making it easy for people to have that information and make it useful, that's really at the heart of what we're doing. And so there's three big buckets around that. One is just around the collection. So having easy ways to get the data in, tools to capture it, both from people being able to enter the information, but then also from different sensors and other things. So for example, I've got one on, we have a Study Watch, which is a clinical grade sensor that we put in clinical studies to collect activity and ECG and other things. So that's one big thing. And then the other one is organizing that data so that it's useful. There's a lot of silos within healthcare in terms of where data is stored and what it is. And so organizing it in a way where it's useful, where you can use machine learning and artificial intelligence and other things to generate insights. And then the last big bucket is around activating that data to generate those insights, things that we haven't been able to see before because there's either been, it's hard to understand or new data that's coming in. So those are the big three buckets. I think specifically within Baseline, which is the division I'm with, which is focused on clinical research, what we're aiming to do is really accelerate the way to get treatments to market. These clinical trials take a lot of time. They're very painful to conduct, and there's the systems that are out there today are just more or less inefficient. And so, ways that we're doing that is using digital tools to help really transform where the clinical trial is even conducted. So right now, it's in the clinical site, and a lot of those are at big academic centers where these studies are administered. And so we're moving it away from there and more into the home to allow people to really participate. So opening it up, making it democratized around anybody that is interested in clinical research can actually be part of it, and lowering those barriers. And then also just making it efficient so that when you're conducting these trials, you can do it faster, you can enroll faster, you can get the data faster, and be able to get products to market. And then the last piece is just getting new novel data in there so that you can find out insights and make claims around treatments that are going to be helpful for patient care. So that's kind of what I see in in the future is just a much more easier way to participate in research, better insights to help with personalized medicine, so that if you're whatever your background is, you know exactly the right treatment that you should be on.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I've noticed in all of your just kind of opening comments, there's a lot of mention of different types of technologies. So Bill, you mentioned sensors, and Jamie, you talked about the tools that are going to be used for remote learning into the future, and certainly telehealth from a delivery perspective. So there's kind of this $1 million question that's going around about whether digital transformation or digital innovation is more about the technology itself and how it gets leveraged, or is it more about how organizations adopt the technology and therefore change their business, change their culture? So I'd like to have a little bit of a debate and see whether you guys think it's more about the technology piece or really it's more about culture. Dr. Colley, do you want to start?
That's a great question. And Caroline knows I'll get on a soapbox about this. In our organization, as we've gone through learning about this, we've been very purposeful amongst our leadership team to read certain books and discuss them. In the beginning, it was all about the technology, and everybody said, "Oh, it's the technology," and the big four that we talk about a lot: cloud computing, Internet of Things, AI, as well as God, I'm blanking on the other one. That's all right; it'll come to me. So it was all about the technology, but then, as we dug into it a little bit more, we actually got people to the other side, but they went to the other side and said, "Oh, it's not about the technology. It's just about how we have to change the business. It's about culture. It's about changing our way of thinking." But the reality is really down the middle, right? You can't just change things and not know how you're going to change them. You have to understand, what is Internet of Things? When I started this whole thing, I used to hear that term all the time, but I didn't really understand it. I don't even like the name. I like what Bill's using, wide availability of sensors that can collect information. I think that's actually more helpful. But you got to kind of understand that in order to understand how you might change the business. You have to look at cloud computing and what might that do for you. We stepped into heavy cloud computing right at the beginning of COVID when we went heavy into telehealth. Now, we've been doing a lot of telehealth at MUSC, but we couldn't go to the next level because almost immediately we were told that we don't have enough server time. And we quickly moved into the cloud, and it allowed us within a week or two to go very big in terms of telehealth. So you got to kind of understand those things to actually figure out how to change the business. So I don't think it's one versus the other. If you made me lean, I'm going to lean a little bit toward understanding the business side. But I have found, even personally, that you can't lean too hard there. You really do need to understand, what is it about cloud computing that's different? What is it about these technologies that are going to change things? So I'll stay in the middle, but you forced me to lean. I'm just going to lean a little bit to the fundamental business change.
Okay, fair enough. What about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I lean a little bit more towards the culture side, and I've been Microsoft for almost 22 years, across several different CEOs, and what I would share is that our current CEO really has focused on a culture change, and you have to feel like you're part of an organization that is focused on learning and growing, and when you do that and you create that culture, you have people who start to take thoughtful risks, who feel like they have a supportive leadership environment. They'll learn from whatever happens from that thoughtful risk, and then go back into their organizational culture and their business, to Pat's point. So you have to have the technology and you have to have that innovation, but that culture really buttresses a lot of what you're trying to do. And we'll just inside of Microsoft in the last 4 to 5 years, we've made dramatic improvements. And I think we always had good technology, but the culture really has unlocked a lot of good ideas that have risen to the surface because a culture allows them to. And you're much more focused on working with our clients, working with our partners. So I lean a little bit more towards the culture side, but you need a little bit of both.
All right, Bill, are you going to break from the crowd, or are you sticking with the culture train?
You would think that being part of Google and Alphabet, I would say technology, only technology. But actually, I'm going to side with Dr. Colley and Jamie on this and go with culture. I do believe that you do need to have technology, but it has to, what we've found is that it really, and Caroline, it comes to your point, it needs to be intuitive. It needs to be easy for the user to use it. It doesn't need to be all that cutting edge sometimes. I mean, this is I think in general, the healthcare industry lags behind a lot of other industries, and just even having good software is good enough to make a major dent. Why I side more with the culture change side of things is that at its heart, healthcare is a lot about behavior change and culture. Patients taking their medications or physicians knowing what treatments to offer. Is a lot of that is behavioral and not purely just around technology. And so it's and I think this is one of the things that a lot of tech companies get wrong, is that they think it's only about technology, and they come out with this great technology and they expect the healthcare industry to immediately adopt it. And it's not the case. I mean, it really takes a lot of time. You're going into each health system, having sold the cutting edge innovative technology before. It's individual conversations with physicians to get them to use the technology, with health systems to get them to adopt it, and it takes a long time to get things to get adopted versus like the consumer world where things can take off almost overnight. So I'll side with the cultural side as well.
Man, I was hoping for a more intense debate, but it sounds like there's clear consensus here, so I need to just let it go.
I mean, Carolyn, let me push on that just a little bit, because you guys are both tech companies. I can just give example after example. Sometimes in healthcare, we rely on our IS or IT team to come up with the new technologies, and sometimes we as leaders, we rely on them, but we don't know what technologies exist. I'll give you an example. About 10 years ago, we were having some issues with glucose monitoring in the hospital. And at the time, we were really having trouble with getting the results to our physicians quickly. And that was the basic issue. And we went through all kinds of machinations to do it. And, I could tell you, this is a task force that was going on for months to help solve this. And some young guy came in and said, how come the glucometers can't be all hooked up to the internet and just report automatically? And it was all of a sudden, it was an aha that was possible. Team actually looked into it. There were systems available that could do that, albeit they were a little bit early, but it forced us to go to that new technology. Now, but I'll use that same technology. When we went to it, the culture change was significant because the results were coming in too quick. So, and then we had to deal with that. So it is a both. We do need to understand how technology might change some of the basic things we do every day. And sometimes we don't think those solutions are out there.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, I do think obviously a lot of members in the audience today are trying to think about how these technological advances are going to impact their businesses and what they need to focus on. So maybe a quick rapid fire question. I mean, we know the kind of big 4 areas in digital innovation that are coming, right? And, Dr. Colley, I think you referenced a few of these earlier: cloud computing, artificial intelligence / machine learning. big data, and then Internet of Things. So if you had to pick one, which do you think is going to be the most transformational for the folks who are attending the conference with us today? And maybe we'll go to Bill first.
So I would go with artificial intelligence, or AI, almost hands down, around how transformational it is around patient care. Let's just focus on, I guess, patient care. And the main reason is that with AI, it allows you to analyze a lot of data very quickly and provide either faster diagnosis or better treatment. And you're starting to see this with a lot of new companies in the healthcare area. I've been a part of a couple of them myself. What you're able to do with AI, it takes a lot less resources, and it also helps with the patient care. So I'll just give one example. The last company I was with before Verily was a neurodiagnostics company called Cerebell, and we had a rapid EEG system where the EEG would come in, and we used machine learning to develop an algorithm to do seizure detection. So what would typically take an epileptologist a long time to review, hours and hours of EEG to diagnose non-convulsive seizures, so a treatment could come out. We could do that almost real time, looking at the data, and so what it leads to is just faster diagnosis, faster treatment. And also reduces the burden on these epileptologists and these specialists of reviewing this stuff and not waking them up in the middle of the night to be able to do diagnosis and other things. So that's one of the things I see a lot of potential in is AI.
Great. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I would also lean towards AI, and I would just call out with an example that there really is a bit of a virtuous cycle, because you kind of need what cloud computing offers, which is that low storage, low cost of computing. We've always had relatively big data sets, and that relative is important because that they're growing so quickly. And then you put those machine learning models on top of that, and then that virtuous cycle kind of can create that innovation. And the example I'd use is during the last year, we worked with one university to do a model that would normally take, on their high performance compute cluster, it would take weeks to run, and we did it overnight by just getting tens of thousands of cores and putting them together in a cluster and then just running it overnight. And I think that model, that AI model, was the innovation, but to have the scale of the data and the computing was important to make that AI, render and work and have a result. So, but I think AI is going to be a huge transformational breakthrough for us.
Yeah, it sounds like to me you're almost kind of laying out this argument that cloud computing, access to big data, Internet of Things, which produces data, are almost all feeders into artificial intelligence, which is what's going to be truly transformational. Pat, anything to add on that topic?
I would agree with that. I mean, to Bill's point, we already have a lot of big data today in healthcare, particularly, a lot of it. And just because a lot of us went to electronic health records in the last 10 years, and you almost can't even review an entire chart anymore. So I could use AI today to help make better decisions, find things quicker, all kinds of stuff. But by having Internet of Things or sensors and that's going to feed more data and bigger data sets, and going to need to have some kind of cloud computing in order to deal with all that. So I would agree it sort of feeds on itself. But having we do prospective payment here at MUSC, and I did prospective payment almost 30 years ago when I first got into healthcare. I couldn't even imagine doing that, doing prospective payment without AI these days. And yet that's exactly what we did 30 years ago. It was gambling. But today I know exactly what's going on. I know who the high-risk patients are. We can really do something different. And I think it's going to accelerate where healthcare is going in terms of this value based atmosphere that we're hurtling toward.
Great. Well, we're certainly giving the audience a lot to think about. So if you aren't thinking about artificial intelligence and how to apply it to your business, now sounds like a good time to start. So, we can't avoid the whole conversation around COVID-19 and the global pandemic that we're all living through right now. So I really want to talk a little bit about how digital health and rapid innovation has helped your organizations kind of make it through the pandemic so far. We're obviously in an ever evolving journey. When we first kicked off almost a year ago now with the pandemic, we were really focused on testing. Now we're talking about vaccine distribution and how are we going to track, or are we going to track who's been vaccinated? So there's always something coming down the pike, and it's really forced us outside of our comfort zones. So I'd love to hear from you, Jamie. What's the most exciting project going on at Microsoft right now when it comes to digital health that's applicable to COVID-19?
Yeah, and so I guess that is, to your point earlier, there are some silver linings in terms of some of the very rapid innovations that we've been working on. And so I guess a couple examples I'd give. When researchers would do their research, there was a kind of a story that the person would go to their lab. And so when you look at one of the challenges we had with COVID is, you physically could not get into spaces. And I don't think many folks ever designed their research enterprise to be remote. And so when you make a research enterprise or a research lab remote, it creates a lot of challenges in terms of access, security, and then to the point that were made earlier, how do you use all the different tools that you might have used that were primarily on premise? And so one of the things that I've been really amazed on is how universities and medical centers have figured out how to do everything remote. Pat talked about telehealth, but there's a lot of work to be done just to make sure research can be handled remotely. And imagine there's processes around transplants that was all very much on-premise physical. And so how do you make a supply chain for transplants or all the different research things that we're working on? So I'm just really impressed with, when I look at some of our university partners, how they were able to pivot, a lot of their research to really accelerate in COVID. And so there's a lot of work that was obviously done in the vaccines, supply chains. We're working with a lot of different states and cities now in terms of vaccine registration and distribution. But I still am amazed on some of the different research work that's come out, just during COVID, and I think that's actually made innovation even go faster at some of these big research enterprises where it had a different pace before COVID, and now it seems like that pace has accelerated for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, Pat, tell us a little bit about how digital innovation has impacted MUSC's response, and then maybe also thinking what's coming next. I mean, what are we preparing for in the next chapter of the pandemic journey?
Well, for MUSC, the biggest change was telehealth. So for us, we are a Center for Telehealth, and actually a national center, one of two in the nations. We pivoted heavily into telehealth about 7 years ago, really in collaboration with the state of South Carolina. We developed many programs over the years, something like 80 some different telehealth programs of all different kinds, some face-to-face, some asynchronous, some monitoring at home, all kinds of stuff. And we were growing, progressively every year when it came to telehealth. But come COVID just launched all of that extremely fast and put almost the entire enterprise onto telehealth quickly. Part of that was because we were ready for it. Part of it was because we had to make some quick decisions in order to get there as well. We are But what we've also seen as COVID is not impacting us, we've seen relaxing of that telehealth go back pretty quickly. So what we've tried to do here is we're actually making an institutional decision that all of our visits going into the future will have at least 30% of them will be telehealth. So we don't want to retract all the way back, which gets to that culture change. If once COVID's over, if you don't do anything different, we're going to go back to that lower level. So we're maintaining it. So in order to maintain it, requires a lot of education, a lot further investment in technology. So that's been the most transformative for us. At the moment, what's coming forward, vaccine logistics and everything there. We're vaccinating as many people on a daily basis as we see for everything else in our entire health system. So just think about that. So we've doubled the number of people we see simply because of vaccination, and that's not going away. So that's going to continue to stress us. We're going to have to find the right ways to do this. And at the same time, we still have a very limited supply. So what we're doing today, we actually need to take up 3 or 4 levels, once more adequate supply is available. And, there's going to be a variety of tools that we're going to have to use in order to make that as efficient as possible and get those shots in arms, get them in the right arms. We're going to have to go out and find those high-risk communities. Don't just open the door and say anybody can get vaccinated, but purposefully we're going to have to use things like AI to find where those high-risk patients are. So there's a lot ahead of us. I don't see us really relaxing from COVID. It's going to be another year just because the whole vaccination component is in front of us at this point.
Great. I would imagine some folks are shuddering by the fact that you said it's going to be another year. So you heard it here first, folks. But, things are getting better. I think we're seeing progress, but we're a long way away from actually getting back to normal state. Bill, tell us what's going on at Verily. How have you guys been using artificial intelligence or big data to combat COVID-19?
Yeah, so we've been doing actually quite a bit around COVID in a few different areas. Our business wasn't really set up to do this, but it was more of a call to action of, okay, where can we help out when this pandemic started? And one of the immediate first things that we looked at is how can we repurpose our clinical studies platform to be able to do screening and testing for COVID testing. And so we stood that up, and now to date we've done over 2.3 million tests so far. We as of next week we will be in over 1,200 testing sites across 16 states. To allow for a very seamless process of being able to get screened, schedule an appointment, go there, get the results immediately returned through directly to the participant. So that's one of the things we've helped recruit for different studies, some COVID vaccine studies, as well as antibody trials to get participants in there. We also created a solution for employers and universities to be able to bring their employees and their students back to work in campus safely through rigorous testing and symptom tracking and other things. And so a lot of that is very software driven. We've also stood up a CLIA lab ourselves because the turnaround times for some of the larger labs were taking a while. So we decided to create our own CLIA lab. So there's a lot of things that we've been jumping in. I think the one that's most exciting right now is that we're helping support the Pfizer phase 4 surveillance study for their vaccine to track 20,000 healthcare workers over the course of 2 years to see the long-term safety profile for and efficacy for this vaccine. And we're doing it in a fully decentralized way. So really anybody can participate. The study's called Hero Together. If you're a healthcare worker and you've gotten vaccinated, you can join. And we've used our technology to be able to really allow anybody to join from anywhere.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. We're rounding out towards kind of the end of our time together. So maybe a final question and then we can wrap up. I'd love to hear if you all have any advice for our very diverse audience today. Many of them create products and services in the life sciences. They work in healthcare delivery, or they support the life science industry, across the region and the country. I think we have a lot of accountants and lawyers and other folks who support the industry as a whole. So, Dr. Colley, I'll start with you. What advice do you have for the audience today that you want to leave them with before we close out?
I would, a lot of you are trying to connect with academic medical centers. I meet with people all the time, and I would come in with a relatively quick, balanced approach. I've had companies come in, it's all about value, like I was telling you before, it's all about the one side. Or have other companies come in, talk all about the technology. I would say more people are leaning over here, and yet they don't tell me about the technology. So I would come in balanced. I really need to hear, I'm a sophisticated consumer when it comes now to digital transformation. So if you want to connect with me, tell me about the technology, but you don't need to go into a ton of detail, but then talk about the value side. And I really need to hear both, and that helps me make a decision going into the future. So I hope that helps.
Great. Jamie?
Yeah, I've seen some amazing technology from a variety of partners and companies, and I guess I would recommend two things. One is security. At the end of the day, people who want to use technology want to have a trust. They want to trust the technology works and does what it says it's going to do, but more importantly, it's going to cause no harm. And so I think there's just a general reluctance, and especially with some recent issues in the news, and just know that hospitals and healthcare and education institutions are some of the most targeted enterprises for cybersecurity. So I think security just needs to be at the core of what you do, and to make it really easy for people. And then the second, don't underestimate diversity in your team, diversity in your staff. I think Pat had an example where you have to have a voice of someone who has a different perspective than you. And I think, whether it's the state of South Carolina, your individual enterprises, make sure you have that diversity across your staff. You'll be amazed at what that does for you, and it creates, again, a great dividend into your company and going forward into your community. So I just say, make sure that diversity of thought and diversity overall, I think that's just beneficial for all companies.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jamie. We've certainly found that diverse voices and perspectives beget innovation. So it's extremely relevant to today's conversation. Bill, final word of advice for the crew today?
Sure, and I'll take it in. There's two, I think, different groups. There's the large companies and health systems, and then there's, I would say, like the digital tech companies, or ones that are newer. For the large companies and health systems, I think it's really being open-minded around technology. Healthcare in general is conservative, but thinking of ways to pilot certain things where you address your concerns, and also just having an expectation that a lot of this stuff will come out and it won't be perfect, and that there is going to be some things that it's going to be improved. And a lot of these things that we're talking about are ones where actually the development is a lot faster. So anything that has to do with software, AI, those sorts of things are things where it can be improved in a faster turn than a lot of other like drugs and other things that take a lot longer time. And then on the digital tech companies and the new entries to the space, with COVID, you're seeing a lot of people kind of enter healthcare that hadn't really been in before, trying to help, which is great. But you really need to understand the industry. There's a lot of nuances and other things that are specific to healthcare, and making sure that you have a good understanding of those things around how reimbursement works, around data privacy, like Jamie was mentioning, and other things, and making sure that you are getting either consultants or experts to help you with that, because you can spend a lot of time on developing things that are just not going to do well in the market if you don't really think about these other things in advance.
That's fantastic. Thanks. Well, what a really interesting discussion today. I really want to thank each of you for being willing to give us the time and share your perspective and thoughts. I think the major takeaways are COVID's not going away, and artificial intelligence is going to be transformative to the life science and healthcare industries. So I appreciate your help in driving those points home today. Finally, I want to thank MedPoint, again, our sponsor for this segment. Without you, today's conference would not be possible. So thanks again. And with that, I look forward to the rest of our day. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
What a great discussion on the power of innovation. While tech giants like Microsoft and Google create new partnerships and products, businesses here in South Carolina are trying to innovate in their own way. As Sam mentioned earlier, SCBIO has developed an innovation platform to accelerate new ideas specific to the life sciences industry. As SCBIO's Technology and Innovation Manager, I'm working with SCBIO Foundation Vice Chair Dr. Chris Prezimble and other partners to determine how we can best assist our entrepreneurs. We are also working with Clemson University, University of South Carolina, MUSC, Commerce's Department of Innovation, and many others to identify the gaps in this process and how to fill them. We are also partnering with the South Carolina Hospital Association to help link clinician ideas to companies as well as to experts in FDA navigation and reimbursement strategies. One such innovation leader in our state that has taken off because of its COVID response is being honored for their efforts and much more today.
The South Carolina Life Sciences Pinnacle Award for Organizational Contribution honors an entity whose performance over time has resulted in superior results, inspirational leadership, industry support and advancement, consistent innovation, and social and quality of life benefits to employees, clients, and communities across South Carolina, and even across the nation.
When I reflect on the qualities listed for this important award, Vicor Scientific unequivocally checks every box multiple times, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We all know that this has been an extraordinary and challenging year for everyone, and Vicor stands out in so many ways, not only for their incredible response to COVID-19, but also because of their amazing and deep year-round support of their community, numerous special causes, their employees, SCBIO, and South Carolina Life Sciences. About 2 years into my role as CEO of SCBIO, I started hearing about this up-and-coming, fast-growing Charleston-based infectious disease diagnostics company that was planning to anchor the glistening new 22 West Edge Life Sciences Tower and wet lab facilities right in the heart of Charleston's Medical Innovation District. That announcement was a big deal, and I was very curious to meet the two founders, Shay Harrelson and Scotty Branch, who had rapidly built this innovative company from the ground up. And the first time I met both of them, Shay at a CEO roundtable meeting and Scotty on what is still an unforgettable phone call, I was immediately smitten by both of them. They're so different from each other, but go together like peanut butter and jelly. And they're both gutsy and hard-charging. They are a true dynamic duo, and their passion, their vision, and their desire for excellence drew me in immediately. They are two of the most magnetic and committed leaders I've ever had the privilege of working with, and their employees adore them and the unique vibe and positive culture that they've created at Vicor. They've built a juggernaut company with over 400 employees approaching $200 million in sales that has made a difference in thousands of people's lives in all 50 states that they have served during this pandemic, literally processing as many as 25,000 COVID-19 PCR test kits a day from all over America. And in the midst of all this, they continue to forge new partnerships and are bringing new technologies and innovations online that will surely help transform healthcare for the better in the future. Their demonstrated belief and support in SCBIO's mission is extremely humbling, and their investment in SCBIO currently represents the largest one-year financial commitment by a private sector company in our history. And as much as I'm blown away by both of their capabilities, I'm most honored to call them friends. They're inspiring people to be around, and SCBIO is so proud that they're building their extraordinary company in the Palmetto State. And I'd urge everyone to keep their eyes on this amazing company because they are just getting started. Shay and Scotty, thank you from our hearts for all that you do. And it's our great honor to formally honor you, the founders of Vicor Scientific, with this year's South Carolina Life Sciences Pinnacle Award for Organizational Contributions. Congratulations.
Winning this award, especially this year, was incredibly humbling because we are not the only company that dove in head first to serve COVID. So I think that any year receiving an award is exciting, but especially this year.
We're very thankful for all the recognition we've been given, but I would say my honest reaction was, totally just gratification. We're a molecular diagnostics lab, so we do deep dive science. So obviously COVID's kind of what's in the forefront in the communities around the country, but we were doing infectious disease testing when we first opened without COVID. So we handle a plethora of specialties from urine to wound care to respiratory, which is revolved into COVID. But we do PCR technology. So point being is we accurate diagnosis with speed.
From a numbers standpoint, we grew immensely. We had 42 employees at the very beginning of the year. We're now over 450 employees. We grew from 6,000 square feet to a total of 60,000 square feet to incorporate all of our departments with Vicor. COVID's really taught us the strength of partnerships, and so we're focused on strategic partnerships in 2021. One of those is a company called QuantGene, and QuantGene has been in research and development for about 5 years.
QuantGene is the bridge of AI and healthcare. So it's early detection liquid biopsy for cancer, where we'd be able to go from a molecular level in the blood to understand before a patient is diagnosed with cancer that there's potential for cancer.
Innovation to me is a commitment to not settling for the status quo. And in medicine, that means you're constantly looking forward for invention and development and discovery so that you can improve patient care. SCBIO has been amazing for us this year because Scotty and I both move very fast at everything that we do, and SCBIO actually stayed ahead of us. And you guys were kind of steering the ship for us in South Carolina, and you were looking for what was around the next corner and really the relationships that we would need to form in order to meet our goals. And so I feel that South Carolina and SCBIO has been a very integral part of our growth this year just because of relationships in a high-powered network.
Congratulations to Shay and Scotty and the entire Vicor Scientific team for being named South Carolina's Life Sciences Pinnacle Award winner for Outstanding Organizational Contribution. We are so thankful for their contributions as this conference's presenting sponsor, as well as Nephron Pharmaceuticals, today's champion sponsor. We'd also like to thank all of the other sponsors who helped make this event possible. We hope you are enjoying our program so far, and we have so much more in store for you. Great speakers, more awards, the exhibit hall, virtual partnering, and more. Still, we recognize that you likely need to take a moment to refuel this morning. As you stretch your legs, walk, or click back to the virtual attendee hub to check out our virtual exhibit hall. It will be open for the next 15 minutes and then again for an hour after our session this morning, and tomorrow too. And speaking of tomorrow, our virtual attendee hub will be loaded with one-on-one meetings. If you haven't scheduled any yet, please check it out and do so, since we aren't together in person. It's the next best thing. And it's a great way to create new relationships or rekindle existing ones. When we come back, we'll enjoy comments from Dr. Michelle McMurray-Heath, President of the National Bio Organization. She will be sharing her insights on the power of people. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. I'm Alyssa Fleming, healthcare partner at Womblebon Dickinson and recent addition to the SCBIO Board of Directors. I've seen firsthand the power of the people that are part of this organization and industry, including fellow board members, investors, and state leaders. And it is indeed the power of the people that our next discussion will focus on. Many of you know that SCBIO is a state affiliate of the National Bio Organization. And throughout this pandemic, we've relied on the expertise and perspective from leading executives at Bio to help educate and guide our investors, industry, and members. Today, Bio President and CEO Dr. Michelle McMurray Heath and SCBIO's EVP and COO Aaron Ford will discuss the power of the people and the importance of science, diversity, and leadership in building a better world.
Thank you, Alyssa. I'm excited for our discussion with Dr. Michelle McMurray Heath, President and CEO of BIO, the Bio Innovation Organization, representing 1,000 life science companies and organizations from 30 countries, the world's largest science and public advocacy association. Welcome, Dr. McMurray Heath, to our virtual annual meeting.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you.
Well, we're excited. And I'll tell you, you became just the third CEO in BIO's history last June, the middle of a pandemic. What a way to start. We are thankful for your leadership. Now, with the focus of today's discussion on the power of people, what has surprised you or impressed you most about the power of people in relation to working together to battle COVID-19?
Well, it's such a wonderful topic because I think 2020 showed us many things, but one of the things it shined a very clear light on was how collaboration and people working together could speed things up in a way we never even dreamed possible. So when I think of that trial by fire of starting at Bio in June and getting a chance to have that bird's eye view of our industry, that's the first thing that comes to mind. The collaborations we saw from big companies to small companies, from nonprofits to industry, from federal government scientists to our for-profit scientists. It was just so interesting to see all of those collaborations across those divides. And so I think the power of people through 2020 was really about forgetting your category or your lane and really reaching outside of that to find new ways to connect, because it was just so critical for us to find answers. And you can see the net results. I mean, the amazing vaccines and therapeutics that were developed this year are just a testament to how effective that kind of power is.
We really did see that. You're right. The bright spot is the people and the companies, as you mentioned, just working together to develop those vaccines. So now here we are, and the not so bright part, right, is the plans to administer those vaccines. What are your thoughts? How can we do better, and even future plans for vaccinations?
Well, I think we have to start at the beginning, which is we had this amazing national plan for helping accelerate the development of vaccines. Operation Warp Speed really brought different arms of the government together that are often at odds with each other to say, how can we step out of the way and help our companies go faster, which was wonderful. But we didn't see the same attention to having a plan for vaccination. And so we got what happens when you don't plan, when you don't orchestrate something that is complex and needs very finely tuned orchestration, you get a mess on your hands. And that's what we saw in late December, early January. It was a free-for-all with states really trying to grapple with a lack of direction from a federal level, lack of resources to be able to implement the plans that they did have for administering vaccines, and wanting more clear guidance from the federal authorities in terms of how to commence with their plans. We're seeing that tide shift. We're already up close to 1 million doses a day. The Biden administration just in the last couple of days has come out and said that they want us to have a target of 1.5 million doses a day, which is fantastic when you consider that the first two priority categories, 1A and 1B, contain about 80 million people just in those first two categories. So it's wonderful to have this 100 million doses delivered in the first 100 days goal. And now that's been further increased so that it's 1.5 million doses a day. And that is what it's going to take, a dedication and coordination. If there's one thing I would say that I wished the new Operation Warp Speed and the COVID task force of the Biden administration would do is pay very close attention to making sure you're having better communication to the states about the delivery of the supply, because just having states have clarity about when they can expect doses and when doses are unlikely to come will prevent some of the wastage that we're seeing, and it will help also orchestrate the lines and the delivery so that people aren't waiting with lack of information about when they can receive their vaccines.
It is important, that communication, right? It seems sometimes so easy, though, when you have so many people at so many different levels and agencies working together, sometimes easier said than done, as we've all seen. Well, when we talk about process, and today's audience, engineers, right? All about process. So today's audience made up of engineers, industry leaders, clinicians, educators, all of those that support our industry and dedicated to the advancement of science. Now, they may have friends, family, challenging science and the effectiveness of vaccines because of the speed at which they were developed. How do you respond to people that have lost faith in science?
Well, faith in science was really challenged in 2020. There were messages coming from all levels of our society casting doubts on the scientific enterprise. And what I've always loved about science, and I'm a bench scientist by training, is that science doesn't care if we believe in it or not. The science is the science. And it can either be wielded to help us accomplish our goals and protect our future, or it can be misused or discarded. And so the science is there to help us if we just embrace it and take advantage of it. I know the speed made people question, well, we're corners cut, especially since there was a lot of conflicting messaging coming from the administration about whether science could be trusted or not. But I will tell you, administration aside, Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. Our companies, our science-driven companies, are about the business of human health, and they would not cut a corner no matter what was provided for them, because it just is so important to the future of those companies. And our companies transcend political administrations, and they are there for the long run to help us deal with human disease. So I have complete confidence. In fact, if there's any message I would convey, is that the COVID vaccines you're seeing now went through more testing, more scrutiny, more eyes involved in the approval processes of almost any product that has gone through the FDA process. So you can have complete confidence in what's available today, and they are really shining in how both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are working.
It's right. It's that long-term view, and sometimes just having folks like yourself to help explain what science is, and like you said, I love how you said it doesn't really matter. Science is what it is. So and when you started at BIO, you were going to tackle big issues, is what you said, and you have. Announcing a bioequity agenda last August that includes 3 pillars of change. Can you explain those pillars and the importance of this agenda?
Yeah, of course. So, when we really started looking at how the country was grappling with racial injustice last summer, there were a couple of things that we wanted to achieve. We wanted to call attention to the amazing dedication and work many of our companies have been doing for decades in this space. And I know that firsthand. I've seen how our companies have really, in many cases, gone above and beyond to try to make their workplaces innovative and inclusive. Now, there's more room to go, that's for sure. There's more that can be done. And we wanted to also embrace that in a wholehearted way that didn't shy away from that reality. But we also wanted to celebrate how innovation-based businesses like ours have long known that they depend on diversity of thought to get to creative answers sooner rather than later. And speed is so important to how all of our companies operate. And so that bringing that diverse thought to the table is something I think our companies knew before many other sectors knew. So that was something we really wanted to highlight. So we have 3 areas. The first is really around clinical trial diversity and inclusion, making sure that going forward, we do everything we can as bio and as an industry to support representative clinical trials, because this is going to be so important for how communities receive our innovations and how they can see themselves in the science. Now, we took COVID as really kind of the crucible for that. And we rolled up our sleeves and did everything we could to help our COVID vaccines, antiviral, and therapeutic manufacturers diversify their clinical trials. We helped connect them with advocacy organizations and minority communities, and we've seen great results. And in addition, we've worked very hard to advocate on behalf of affordable access to COVID vaccines and therapeutics. So all of this work was to say, we are with you. We are holding hands with minority leaders to say, how can we make sure COVID is an example of how we can do better going forward, and then learn from that example in the future. The second pillar was really around the talent pipeline. And this is something we're still in the midst of building, which is we're trying to build a virtual community of the many shining examples of minority scientists and entrepreneurs that have been nurtured within our industry to date, so that they can, particularly our smaller companies that may not have a dedicated resource to diversity and inclusion, or may not have scholarships and fellowships programs because they're really focused on getting their first product to market. We want them to be able to take advantage of some of the investments that our larger companies have made in these areas and get access to that great talent that's been trained and is at the ready. And then our third pillar is really about the power of the purse, using our great influence amongst our suppliers to make sure that we are patronizing women-owned and minority-owned businesses, or businesses who have made diversity and inclusion a large priority for their practice, so that we are incentivizing other sectors to also view this area so critically.
So a lot of work to be done, you said, and so it's just when you mention it all, it's like, whoa, And so later this morning, we are going to be talking about the power of partnerships and discuss those healthcare disparities that you mentioned that have been highlighted for many states because of COVID. So promoting that diversity in clinical trials, how do you see states achieving success in this area?
So it's so important for us to first declare the goal, to realize how important it is to have representative clinical trials. We're seeing this in real time with the COVID vaccines. The facts that the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine trials had between 35 and 42% minority participation is really helping us when we're talking about communities, about how appropriate these vaccine choices are for their communities and families. So it's very, very important. So declaring the goal is first and foremost. The second is doing everything we can to decrease the barriers to participation, to make sure that we are facilitating clinical trials that can be done in disparate settings, so that you don't necessarily have to migrate to the big academic medical center to participate in a clinical trial, that you don't necessarily commit yourself to 2 years of follow-up appointments that include a lot of taking time off from work. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit we can do to simplify enrollment in clinical trials. And what I love about it is that this is something that will not just help have better minority participation in trials, it will help have better participation from everyone in clinical trials. And I think that's something that's key. And then finally, we have to embrace technology and real world evidence. We have to shrink the size of clinical trials so that they're not necessarily wedded to an out-of-date approach that is very labor, time, and human resource intensive to get to the end result. We want to know that our products are safe and effective, but we want to use the most high-tech approaches we can to shrink the footprint of clinical trials, because that's very, very key. So anything that states can do to help facilitate breaking down those barriers, to partner with their companies as they're trying to get news out about enrollment, would be very, very helpful.
Well, we thank you for that advice, and we've been doing that, and that's been for us very valuable that we've been able to work with our companies through this and help educate those South Carolinians that might not have understood clinical trials. Many of us didn't, right? Before we were all in this. So we had, again, appreciative of BIO's guidance. And in fact, we've had BIO's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Elliot Francis, who's wonderful, at a recent SCBIO board meeting. And he helped us look and try to improve our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, as you mentioned, we all have work to do. So let's focus on BIO's Expand sort of filter. Last fall, we at SCBIO had our first ever Young Women in Life Sciences conference, virtually, of course. We had over 500 young girls, high school aged girls from 85 different schools attend, and they listened to a diverse group of women leaders, and it was an amazing day. We addressed so many different questions. So one I have for you is, what do you think is the most significant barrier to female leadership?
You know, it's interesting. The first answer that comes to mind, there's many, but the first answer that comes to mind is sometimes we're our own worst enemy. You know, we sometimes as women think that there are things that we can't do or shouldn't do or can only do in a certain way. And that sometimes negates our own individual passions and abilities and experiences. So I would say first, kind of unshackle yourself from any image of what a female or a female scientist should be, and be the kind of scientific leader or explorer that you want to be. I think that's first and foremost. The next is that we have to make sure that we are in our workplaces making room for women's real lives. I think we've seen during the pandemic, you know, my 9-year-old is back in in-person school today, so I don't have the threat of her walking in the door any moment. But I think the pandemic has shown us the reality that a lot of working moms face and working dads. And so it's very important for us, for everyone in our workplace, to make room for family, because it's a key part. Look, we don't want people to stop having families. This is so essential for our future. So if that's our goal, then we need to make sure that we accommodate that in the workplace. And I think we're going to have to repair some of that when we come back from the pandemic. I think a lot of people have had to sacrifice around work to help balance the extra familial responsibilities they've had during the pandemic. So we, as an industry, need to be very cognizant of that. And then finally, I would say follow your curiosity as well. Whatever question is the most of interest to you, that keeps you up at night, is really the one that you should pursue, be it scientific or otherwise. But I think there are a lot of great scientific minds out there that are just waiting for the permission to follow their curiosity.
I love that. Follow your curiosity. I'm going to remember that myself. And I can hear you and understand you too with the family, right? So I have a 12-year-old myself. I think things got very real this year, that everything isn't perfect, and that is okay, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, you have achieved so many distinctions, you know, including becoming the first African American to graduate from the Duke Medical Science Training Program, earning both an MD and a PhD degree. I've heard you speak about how this path was not an easy one for you. So will you share your story of attending Duke and how you found your voice?
Sure. You know, it was such an interesting thing, because I started at Harvard and I was very, very interested in biology and medicine, but also became increasingly interested in science. And so in my typical way of splitting the baby, I said, okay, I'm going to do both. And so I set out to do an MD and a PhD program. And when I landed on campus that very first week, someone from the administration said to me, oh, well, we're so glad to have you here, because, you know, the first African-American we admitted to the program left after having a psychotic break. So we're so hopeful that you're here today.
Not a great way to start. Oh my goodness.
Not a great introduction. It was very well intentioned though, but and that's, I think, a lesson to us all in this process of becoming more equitable in the spaces we build, is that sometimes those good intentions can put undue pressure, focus, spotlight on individuals. And, you know, to go through that 7-year program wondering, okay, was it that person? Was it the setting? Was this, you know, insanity-inducing goal to even pursue was challenging. And also knowing that my ability to complete it or not probably would have a great impact on those who were coming behind me. And so, I think that's something that's not unusual in terms of a responsibility that women and minority scientists and leaders face as they go along their path. So I'm not claiming that it's unique at all. But I think it was one of those situations where I realized the potential impact, for better or for worse, and really had to get clear on what I needed to make it through the program. And it was actually a United Negro College Fund Merck Fellowship, which is part of the reason I know our companies have been dedicated to this for decades, that really helped me get the independence, the resources, and the self-confidence I needed to make it through the program. I often say, medical school, as long as you show up and pass your test, you'll make it through. But graduate school is completely different. It's completely in your hands, whether you finish or not. And it's at the pace that you pursue. And so having that self-confidence, that wind at your back is very essential. And so when we're mentoring people that are coming along behind us, it's important for us to remember to help support them in that confidence as they try to make their own path.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what a way to start. And look where you are now. So, it all works out.
It all worked out. It all worked out, definitely. And I think it was probably decades before I looked up and fully realized the impact that statement had. But that's how life is, right? You just keep on keeping on. And then in the rear view mirror, you kind of realize all of the forces at play.
Right. You didn't realize how impactful that was when you look back and you, oh yeah, that was pretty big. Yeah. So, so now here we are at our industry front and center, a new administration in office. So what are the top legislative topics related to our industry that you see being a priority now?
Yes. So we're at BIO just getting ready next week to release our 100 Days of Innovation. And it's our call on the Biden administration to say, what can you accomplish in your first 100 days to show the promise of our innovative industries and really pursue those. So their priorities around climate change, their priorities around COVID and making sure that, the early gains that we've seen in developing therapeutics and vaccines do not stop now, that they continue to go and that they actually make it to the patients who need them, because we're seeing problems not just on the vaccine side, but also in the distribution of therapeutics as well. So we want to make sure that that stops. We also want to have some pragmatic conversations around how we support both innovation and research and development and accessibility and affordability of drugs. Those are critically important. We have to accomplish both goals. And so we really need to be partners at the table to find some new approaches to make sure that we don't handicap our innovation, but at the same time, we get our innovations out to the patients who need them. So those are some of our big buckets, but more to come. And you can see the 100 Days of Innovation at bio.org. And we're looking forward at Bio Digital in June of 2021 to do a full look back on the first 100 days of the Biden administration and really, give a grade to how well the new administration has done in promoting innovation.
Well, we appreciate your insights today, and we look forward to participating in the virtual conference. That's something we've been participating in, of course, for years, and so the ability for us to all, as we are here today, virtual, to navigate this is something that we're all learning to do. So we appreciate you taking time to join us here in South Carolina today. We're hopeful for a better 2021, and we thank you again for your leadership and your dedication to our industry.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to visit you guys in person and not just virtually, but maybe someday soon.
Yes, we will look forward to that.
Wonderful.
The South Carolina Life Sciences Pinnacle Award for Individual Contribution annually recognizes an individual whose industry-related efforts have resulted in broad economic, innovation, social, and quality of life benefits that not only have a profoundly positive impact on South Carolina's life sciences industry, but also on its citizens, an impact that could be felt nationally, even globally, in years to come.
Lou Kennedy is a phenom, a force of nature, truly one of the most extraordinary human beings that I have ever encountered. She exudes amazing energy every time she enters a room. Her brilliance in spearheading and leading Nephron Pharmaceuticals' phenomenal growth cannot be overstated. And in her multiple leadership roles, she has positively impacted more people in the state of South Carolina and beyond than anyone I've ever known. Her response to the demands of COVID-19 were stunning. To keep production of vital respiratory therapies going full tilt, she worked tirelessly and creatively to protect a workforce of almost 2,000 employees with on-site antibody and PCR testing, temperature checks, and a daycare center. Nephron set a shining example to large manufacturers on how to navigate the challenges posed by a pandemic. And she did all this while in the process of leading a $215,350,000 square foot expansion of Nephron's sprawling biopharma campus in West Columbia to accommodate future COVID vaccine filling lines, along with the construction still underway of the new Kennedy Innovation Center that will house Nephron MedTech solutions and future onshoring projects. Her service to others and philanthropic missions is second to none. And Lou changes people's lives every day for the better, including mine. Her direct impact on SCBIO and support for the advancement of the life sciences industry in South Carolina has been remarkable and profound. Frankly, there was absolutely no question who the individual of this year is for SCBIO, and it could just as easily be the individual of the decade. I've had the privilege of knowing Lou since I was 6 years old, and we both went to elementary school together in Columbia, and I deeply treasure her friendship. So at this time, it's my great honor to present my dear friend and the dynamic SCBIO Board Chair, Lou Kennedy, with this year's South Carolina Life Sciences Pinnacle Award for Individual Contribution.
When I found out I got the award, I'm not embarrassed to say I just squealed out loud. I was way excited, way happy, and over the moon. Felt such an honor to receive this. So Nephron Pharmaceuticals is our company. It's a private woman-owned business. I'm the CEO. And for 23 years, we've made respiratory medications for people with asthma and emphysema. And in the last 3 years, we've added a whole lot to our pipeline in that we're making about 80 injectable medications, hand sanitizer. We do COVID testing. There have been so many, I would say, game-changing things that have happened for both the good and the bad. And I just, on a personal point of reference, would like to say that, to me, it's brought many of us closer together, even though we're socially distanced. SCBIO has been a fantastic partner with us, especially these last 3 years since Sam has been the CEO. And I think we have now 4 partnerships with vendors and suppliers right here in South Carolina that we never would have even met were it not for SCBIO. So we've got 4 opportunities to do big things, game-changing things, and those were all introductions that we made through SCBIO. I also believe that together we've built the ecosystem for healthcare and life sciences to be a much stronger foundation for anybody who moves into South Carolina to know how to navigate, where to find things, and how to get things done in our industries. We know that the data shows us the more diverse we are, the more productive we are. So it's our goal each and every day to inspire all of us here at Nephron to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's really the definition of the Nephron team. And we're really pleased that we support each other. We have each other's back. We are working together across the labs and across the different departments just to make us better. But the real focus is to have better outcomes for patients. And that's what this team here at Nephron really wants.
Congratulations, Lou. We are so fortunate to have you leading this organization. During this pandemic, our industry leaders, like Lou, have stepped up to help. Our frontline workers, our hospital systems, manufacturing operations, in the labs, and at distribution facilities. So many of you, of us, put your lives and livelihoods on the line ahead of personal interests and safety. And thanks to you and them, better days are ahead. We thank all of you for your love and commitment and celebrate your contributions in our next segment.
I want to thank your President and CEO, Sam Honduras, and your board chair, Lou Kennedy, a longtime friend, for inviting me to address you today. The innovations produced by South Carolina's life sciences industry and the opportunities you provide for life-changing for South Carolinians and your customers around the world. Promoting American innovation is a top priority for congressional Democrats and President Biden. The life sciences are essential components of the innovation that we need to promote and grow our economy and maintain American global leadership. The immediate challenge demanding American scientific innovation is the coronavirus pandemic. As you may know, in addition to serving as House Majority Whip, I chair the House Select Committee on the coronavirus, and we provide oversight of Congress's expenditures on the virus. I commend President Biden and Vice President Harris for swiftly implementing a national strategy to overcome this crisis, including steps to strengthen the medical supply chain and expedite vaccinations. These are steps that my Select Subcommittee advanced last year in order to make our response to this pandemic more effective, more efficient, and more equitable. In Congress, we are working to enact President Biden's American Rescue Plan. That plan will provide the necessary funds to implement the nationwide vaccination program, expand testing and tracing, end supply shortages, and protect vulnerable communities. The plan provides additional assistance to the neediest small businesses and state and local governments. The plan provides additional assistance to the neediest small businesses and state and local governments. It provides extended and enhanced unemployment benefits and direct payments to American families that are struggling to afford rent, mortgages, food, health care, and child care. The American Rescue Plan is only a first step. A comprehensive plan for a strong recovery must follow. Cutting-edge life sciences industries like yours will be a major part of that recovery and of putting Americans to work, creating the next generation of scientific breakthrough. I look forward to being your partner in what is to be a very vital mission. And I thank you for allowing me to be with you today.
As the life sciences industry grows, it does so thanks to innovation, its people, and its amazing partnerships. I'm DePaul Eliatambi, President of Alliance Consulting Engineers and SCBIO board member. I believe that partnerships are the cornerstone of improving health and healthcare for all citizens during and after the pandemic. COVID has drawn attention to existing long-standing racial and ethnic health disparities in South Carolina and across America, providing an opportunity for us to work together and to come together. South Carolina Hospital Association President, CEO, my friend for over 20 years, Thornton Kirby, will lead our next feature panel of state and national leaders, including Dr. Marjorie Jenkins, Dean of the School of Medicine, Courtney Christian, former executive and director of Black Women's Health Imperative, and Dr. Harris Pastides, chair of the South Carolina Institute of Medicine and Public Health and president of the University of South Carolina, who I've known for almost 20 years. Their contributions and ideas will no doubt help us understand how the power of partnerships is essential to achieving a better tomorrow for us all.
Thank you, DePaul. We are looking forward to this panel, and I appreciate the introduction. It's my pleasure today to facilitate a panel of three distinguished experts who know this issue and this state well, and I want to introduce them briefly, and then we'll jump right into our panel. The first is Dr. Marjorie Jenkins, on your bottom right there. Marjorie is the Dean of the USC School of Medicine in Greenville, and she's the Chief Academic Officer for Prisma Health Upstate. Marjorie, before this role, has held a number of leadership roles, as the others have as well. She's worked with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Office of Women's Health. She has been a professor of medicine at Texas Tech University, and she was director of the research program for health professions master's students at Johns Hopkins University. She's got a really diverse background, and she's an expert in health issues related to sex and gender, and her opinions are frequently sought on women's health issues. Courtney Christian, on your top left, is the Senior Director of Policy and Research at Pharma. She focuses on state-based reforms that are impacting health insurance, prescription drug coverage, and public health programs, and health equity. Prior to joining Pharma, Courtney worked as Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Black Women's Health Imperative in Washington, and she also has served on Capitol Hill and several roles, including as a legislative director, which we all know is a significant leadership role. And then on your bottom left is Dr. Harris Pastides, who is the Distinguished President Emeritus at the University of South Carolina. He served as U of SC's 28th president from 2008 to 2019. And prior to serving as president there, he was vice president for research and health sciences and dean of the Arnold School of Public Health, which many of you are probably familiar with. Before taking on leadership roles, Dr. Pastides was a professor of epidemiology and biostatistics at the University of Massachusetts. He's had many leadership roles with the Southeastern Conference as president of the NCAA, and he's currently the only non-physician on the board of the American Medical Association, representing our state there. So I'm delighted to have these panelists with us. They're very well
experienced in many of the issues we're going to discuss. So why are we meeting today? Why this panel? Our purpose today is to really explore the value of partnerships and their potential to improve health for all South Carolinians, particularly underrepresented populations. So I'm just going to give a couple of observations of my experiences with partnerships, and then we'll jump right into the panel and ask about their own examples. So I'm the president and CEO of the South Carolina Hospital Association. As you might imagine, the last 10 months have been busy for our members, the hospitals. We have partnered extensively with many state agencies, none more so than the Department of Health and Environmental Control. So the Hospital Association and DHEC really have partnered in a way you would not normally expect from a regulator and its regulated industry. But essentially, we have made sure that all patients who need to be in hospitals have capacity, that we test people in all corners of the state, and now that we are vaccinating people all over the state. So that partnership has really driven a response, I think, that would not have been possible if the two didn't work together. The Hospital Association also works with SCBIO, and we are exploring more and more opportunities to find new and innovative approaches from the life sciences industry, and so that we can apply them for the benefit of our patients at the bedside. That's just another example of a partnership that has been really robust and rich for our state. The one that I want to use as a transition is from my experience when I worked in the administration at Clemson University, and when I first met President Pastides. I got to see firsthand how the research universities in the state, when they partnered together, really changed the conversation in the elected arenas, the General Assembly, the governor's office, and other spots, because it's not always expected that Clemson and USC and the medical university will agree on everything. And when they do agree and bring forth an agenda together, it really resonates. So those are some places I've seen the partnerships. I'm going to let that be a transition to Harris. President Pastides, you have seen many of these as well. Would you comment on your observations on the power of partnerships?
Yes, absolutely. And good morning and good day to everybody at this very important day for SCBIO and for South Carolina. Let me first say that, both competition and cooperation are natural forces. They're natural to individuals and natural to organizations. But I do believe there have been great examples within our state and between the research universities where we can not obviate, not deny the natural inclination to compete, but you can also cooperate. There's a neologism called co-opetition. I don't know if it's in the Oxford English Dictionary yet, but that's really what I'm talking about. And I think the most prominent example during my time was the Endowed Chairs program, where Clemson, USC, and MUSC came together to compete, if you will, for funds from the Department of Commerce and the state to identify and recruit endowed chairs, often in the biomedical biotech arena. But we were given more points, if you will, if we collaborated with one or both of the other universities. So it was incentivized, if you will. So denying the competitive spirit is not an easy thing. And I think we need to think of ways to incentivize it. We can always say that, well, you'll be more successful that way, but that may not be quite the incentive enough. And so, if you're in the private sector, if you're in the government sector, I think we need to think of ways to incentivize that. So Dr. Martin Morad is one example. We have others, including at the USC School of Medicine, Greenville. But Dr. Morad was recruited by all three research universities. We got him from Georgetown University Medical Center. He's working on a biological pacemaker. So one day, if you have a heart attack, he'll be able to take stem cells from your skin, derived from the skin, but create beating heart cells, inject them back into the ailing heart, and restore heart function. Now, we're not there quite yet, but wouldn't it be great if that biological pacemaker is someday known as the South Carolina pacemaker? That could never have been done by one university alone.
That's well said. Your description of co-opetition, Harris, reminds me of a Low Country story or metaphor, which is the crab in the bucket phenomenon. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but when you put a bunch of crabs in the bucket, as soon as one starts to get out, the others pull it back down. And I want to thank you and commend you for the fact that during your tenure, we made sure we didn't play that game. We made sure this state elevated by working with everyone's strengths. So thank you for that. Courtney, your pharma experience during this pandemic must have been very interesting. Tell us what you've seen with respect to partnerships.
Certainly. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to SCBIO for having me. I'm delighted to join in this conversation on the power of partnership. I think there is definitely power in collaboration of all of us speaking here today, and certainly between bio and pharma, especially in light of the last year. I think you alluded to 2020 being a year of historic proportions, right? Bringing with it sort of this once in a lifetime global pandemic, the likes of which hopefully we'll never see again. But it really brought our nation to a standstill, and it with its spread and with its high infection rate and its impact on communities of color in particular. But I think that what we saw this year in this unprecedented moment is that our biopharmaceutical industry really sprang into action, right? We came together as companies across the industry to really look for and solve for the problem of our time, trying to find this vaccine and a return to normalcy. And so I think that the strength and innovation of our industry has been on display, but also that of our larger healthcare ecosystem, right? Hospitals and life sciences and our industry really had to band together in this moment and kind of put aside, those feelings of competition and participate and cooperate with each other. And so I think that that's something that will carry us forward in the future for some time to come.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for all of your industry's work to get this vaccine to market in record time. We are all very grateful and look forward to more coming online. Dr. Jenkins, you have had your own experiences in many arenas with partnerships. Tell us about your observations.
Yes, thank you, Thornton. And I want to thank SCBIO for inviting me to be on this esteemed panel with my colleagues. I'll start with why I'm here in South Carolina. I've been here a couple of years. It is because of a partnership with Greenville Health System, now Prisma Health, who partnered with the University of South Carolina to create a medical school in the upstate. And part of that was to address a need for physician shortages in South Carolina. And so really growing up new physicians that train in a very complex environment embedded in the healthcare delivery system. I was at FDA for several years, and in watching the evolution of the past 10, 11 months of this pandemic, where globally countries, companies, pharma really banded together, right, to share the viral genome, to really create vaccines. Why do we have 5 to 10 vaccines in the pipeline, 2 already approved in the US? That is a maximum, representation of partnership. I think the government entities who came together with private industries to create Operation Warp Speed, we will never, hopefully we'll see it again in our lifetime in this sort of rapidly evolving science, but 10 months to a very efficacious and safe vaccine is fairly unheard of. So we have a lot of those partnerships. And lastly, I'll just say that University of South Carolina was one of the top 5 universities in creating their own salivary testing, bringing their students back in a safe environment and partnering with Nephron in order to do so. So there's just been really the best of partnerships, I think, that we've seen in the pandemic. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Those are great observations from all. And I think they reinforce what Sam Konduras told us he wanted us to emphasize. And that is he believed all of us have seen that power of partnership. And of course, you just demonstrated or illustrated how we have. So let's talk about COVID-19 for a minute. All of us have referenced that 2020 will be remembered for a pandemic, the social justice movement, and for polarized politics. It was a very tumultuous year. When we prepared for this panel, Dr. Jenkins said the pandemic has revealed the best and worst of our nation's healthcare system. Marjorie, would you care to elaborate on that observation?
I certainly would. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, where we didn't know much about the novel coronavirus, there was a lot of fear, and yet our healthcare workers really stepped up. Our first responders continued to work. Really, we didn't know it as much about the transmission of the virus. Was it aerosolized? Was it bloodborne? How did that work? And yet these people went in and worked countless hours and shifts and days, some without PPE, right? We had a PPE shortage. They put their lives at stake. Thousands of healthcare workers, frontline workers, have lost their lives in the pandemic, but many millions have continued to go in to save lives. I said, Thornton, about the worst of what we've seen in the worst of our healthcare delivery system is really in parallel to the social injustices that really came to the forefront last year and continue. And that is healthcare access, that is implicit bias in access for people of color, and also for those that were sent home time and time and time again. And we had higher death rates, markedly higher death rates than one would expect in certain populations. So marginalized populations, that really was expanded during the pandemic. And that's a systemic problem that we have to continue to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me open it up to Harris and Courtney. Comments on that or follow on?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Courtney, and then we'll go to Harris.
I would just say I would absolutely agree. In the midst of so much loss last year, we were really contending with this long-standing, enduring legacy of racism in our country, with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, so many before them and so many after them, frankly, that still continue. And so I think these events really contributed to this sort of imperfect storm. I don't think it's perfect. It was an imperfect storm that really brought together sort of our collective anxiety in protecting ourselves from this unseen virus, but also brought up this collective anxiety in really specific lens on social justice issues that we haven't, in a way that we haven't talked about before. And it's a conversation that I think is one that stands to continue. So I think Dr. Jenkins is absolutely right. COVID-19 has laid bare the long-standing health disparities and gaps, and we have a real opportunity moving forward to work together in partnership, the power of partnership, to make sure that we can find ways to close those gaps in the future.
That's well said. Harris.
Well, I could say ditto and ditto, but I've got to earn my keep.
Yes.
But let me say, Thornton, at the outset, you mentioned three social dynamics that were pervasive in 2020 and continue, and that is social injustice, political divisiveness, and of course the COVID-19. I would argue they're not separate. They are one dynamic, all of which have worked together to impede public health's ability, if you will, to do an even better job. Although I'm a hopeful person, I've started documenting, if you will, the good, the bad, and the ugly about our approach to COVID-19, especially at a federal and even at a global level, because I'm not convinced we will automatically do better next time. And I think that might be provocative to the attendees of SCBIO. They might say, well, what do you mean? We've learned so much. Of course, we'll do better next time, but not necessarily. I'll give the example simply at the outset of the pandemic, when CDC and Dr. Fauci thought masks were, probably not all that useful. Well, it doesn't matter how many times after that they said that they are. And they said we were wrong at the beginning. And there are reasons. Virologists could tell you that a mask isn't 100% protective. But even this morning on a morning news show, I heard some people saying they don't know what they're talking about. First, masks were bad. Now they're good. And we've got to understand that public health authorities are grassroots oriented. And so, we learn as we go. We use technology, but we've got to give public health a chance. Government can offer a guiding hand, The private sector can offer a lot of technology and other benefits, but we've got to let public health lead the next time there's a novel virus that comes our way.
I could not agree more. And the what I think has been most disappointing to me, I work and have spent most of my career at the intersection of health policy and health care. And when I have seen the politicization of a virus and people use it to advance a political agenda as opposed to trying to heal people and bring them back to health and prevent illness, it has been very disappointing to see that, just what you described, the fact that early on they weren't sure the masks were efficacious. So as soon as we corrected that, instead of moving on, we're gonna make it look like people were flip-flopping and you can't trust anything they say. That's a problem. I'll just observe when I speak to different groups about healthcare and why America struggles so mightily with, quote, fixing healthcare. I've boiled it down. I believe Americans want three fundamental things from their healthcare system, and they are, by definition, not all compatible with each other. Number one, they want the best healthcare in the world. Americans don't like the idea that some other country has better healthcare. Number two, we want somebody else to pay for it, right? Don't send me the bill for this. And number three, most importantly for this conversation, we do not want to be told how to live our lives. And you can see that. You'll remember the conversation about sodas and big gulps in New York City, and when the city tried to outlaw that, people freaked out about it. But here we see people saying, don't tell me I have to wear a mask. I don't want to wear a mask. You can't make me socially distance. You can't make me do these things. But the same people want their vaccine. They want to be first in line. It's very American, I think, to say I want everything. But it's very hard from a health policy standpoint, a public health standpoint, to accommodate all of those, to give the very best at no one's cost, and to let people behave however they want with impunity. So it is a challenge, and we'll continue to work on it. But Harris, I think you're wise to say, let's not assume we're going to make better decisions next time. Let's document the challenges we've stumbled across and make sure we do better next time. So let me transition us again. How can SCBIO play a role in the reduction of health disparities? We've talked about health disparities as one of the most well-illuminated failures of our healthcare system. What can we do to improve on that? Marjorie, you want to start?
Sure. I think that, SCBIO is a collaborator, right? And a connector. And I think really embodies that policy and that belief that if we can match research with public need and with industry demand, that we can create really a great model for elevation of socioeconomic status of those in South Carolina. And really that model would work globally. But one thing that we have seen during this pandemic, again, is that socioeconomic inequity also leads to inequity in many other facets of life. And that is something that I think really SCBIO really touts, it lives, it's part of its mission and its vision. And so I see that as a real strength for SCBIO.
Likewise. Courtney, you have thoughts?
I do. I think the conversation around equity is really a salient one right now. But I think to get at the heart of these conversations that we really have to address sort of the elephant in the room, and that is sort of the deep distrust that runs in Black and Brown communities, not just of, the pharmaceutical industry, but the healthcare sector writ large. And a lot of that really reflects the systems of oppression that have occurred in communities of color, the historical record, and, sometimes in a lot of cases, painful stories that are passed down within families from generation to generation. So I think that is something that we all have to attack sort of head on, break down sort of these generational walls of distrust across the healthcare system and act in a more transparent manner and really answer hard questions that are posed to us all along the healthcare ecosystem and really work hard to begin to build trust. I think that's one thing that we're working on really hard at Pharma, particularly as we talk about, vaccine uptake in communities of color. I think we've all seen some data that suggests, folks are not necessarily maybe interested in taking the vaccine. They have some qualms. They want to know more about it. They really just want to have all the data to be able to make an informed decision. And so one of the things that our companies recently committed to in last year is we released some first ever principles on clinical trial diversity. So across our entire industry. And what we're really doing with these principles is having those honest conversations. So talking about building trust and acknowledging the historic record of mistrust around clinical trials that exist in Black and Brown communities, thinking about what we can do to reduce barriers to clinical trials to make it more equitable, really using real world data to enhance our information on diverse populations beyond product approval, and then enhancing information about diversity in clinical trial participation. So it's really important to keep all of this in mind as we go forward and have these conversations, whether it's COVID-19 related or just general health topics in communities of color. Those discussions, it's really important to try to find those opportunities to speak to those issues and to build on the unique partnerships across community and government.
Thank you, Courtney. Marjorie, when we did the prep call, you talked about your experience in clinical trials and that it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that minorities and people of color won't participate. Tell us more about your experience.
Right. I think that one thing we did at the Office of Women's Health, which sits in the Office of the Commissioner at FDA, was to lead a national program around diversity in clinical trials. And that was racial, ethnic diversity, that was disabilities, lower socioeconomic status, age disparities. So diversity as a word really should connotate many differences, right? So one thing that we found in the research literature is that we, as researchers, and I'm a researcher, I'm an academic, a scientist, and a physician, and we sometimes assume things that aren't really borne out when we start really addressing it. So in clinical trials, it is interesting that although people of color might make up 40 or 50% of a population with a certain disease, that they may represent only 2% or 10% of a clinical trial. So when we get clinical trial data out, physicians and healthcare providers use that evidence in order to treat patients, right? So we want to treat patients. We want that equity in our delivery system and our therapeutics. But if we don't study the populations that are going to receive those medications or those therapeutics, how are we 100% certain that they are going to be equal in efficacy and in safety? And so I do want to give a shout out to the FDA. They have done a lot in health policy over the past 20 years, but we still have some more work to do. And I'll just echo Courtney in seeing the distrust around the vaccine and around the science. And just to remind everyone that this science the mRNA science around the vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, did not just occur in 10 months. It was studied during the Ebola outbreak. It's been studied during the Zika outbreak. And so it's been studied for almost a decade to really reach this far. So there are, when we are leading a clinical trial, when we're a principal investigator, we need to think diversity first. And I think our pharmaceutical companies also need to demand diversity in their clinical trials. Thank you.
Sure. While you have the floor, Marjorie, you also talked in our prep call about the pipeline of physicians from underrepresented communities. Do you want to, since we're on that topic, you want to elaborate on that a few minutes?
Yes, one thing that brought me to South Carolina was this potential to partner with the largest healthcare delivery system at Prisma Health and also lead a very innovative medical school. A shout out to Dr. Pastides, who was a big champion for our school 9 years ago. But I will say that when we looked at, at where the pipeline is of physicians and students, undergraduate students, who really qualify to get interviews at medical schools and then get accepted to medical schools. I'm going to start nationally, Thornton, to say that we only have about 7,000 to 8,000 African Americans applying to medical schools nationally per year. We have 5,000 Hispanic Latinx. Of those, that number, small number, right? We have about half of that actually get accepted. So we have thousands of diverse want to be physicians that we are somehow not capturing and including in our incoming classes. In South Carolina, the data is disheartening. We receive about 575 applications from South Carolinians every year. We have 3 public medical schools, awesome medical schools in the state. We have more first-year seats for medical students than we have South Carolinians who qualify to come into those populations. And then you look at the diversity of that pipeline. So we have to reach back, I believe, not only into undergraduate, but I think the K through 12 to let people know that they can be physicians, to let them see themselves, to have mentors, to shadow, to have research opportunities. I think as someone who grew up below poverty in a coal mining town in Eastern Kentucky, told I would never be a physician, I think that we need to let our young people know that you can be a physician. It's not the color of your skin. It's not your socioeconomic status. Those are not limitations. And we have to create opportunities to break down those barriers. You can tell I'm passionate about that,
Yes.
right?
And I wanted to be sure we covered that. Thank you for talking about that. Sam and I will continue to talk about that as an opportunity for hospitals and SCBIO to get the word out and make sure we're reaching into communities just as the universities are.
Thank you.
So, sure. So, Harris, we also talked about the state's health and prosperity goals when we talked about what SCBIO can do to help reduce health disparities. Would you share your thoughts on that?
Yes, I will. Let me just piggyback for a moment, though, on what Dean Jenkins said, which is that the undergraduates who are choosing to major in health science or pre-med careers in South Carolina is at an all-time high. One might think that because of the frontline risks, they might have moved away. Not at all. If you talk to the medical school deans and the other health science deans, they can't even handle the undergraduate interest in, and so we've got to broaden the bandwidth, if you will, so we can get more of these qualified in-staters into med school and the other health disciplines. Relative to your question, the notion of taking care of our people and mitigating health disparities is not only the compassionate and the just and the moral thing to do, it's actually the right thing to do for South Carolina's economy. A workforce and a population that is ill, that is suffering from the nation's highest rates, for example, of a diabetic amputation, which is almost always a failure of some part of the healthcare delivery system. We have stopped using the buckle of the stroke belt because we used it for so long. We're looking for more metaphors. But although we're lucky to have an influx of new corporations, I could tell you a barrier to recruiting headquarters and other businesses in all domains will be how healthy is the population. And so it's the right thing to do for South Carolina's economic future as well. It's not only a blue thing, it's a red thing as well. It's really good for everybody when the healthcare costs are skyrocketing because of the failure to prevent an illness. That is bad for everybody's pocketbook. And what I wanted to say as well is relative to SCBIO and its ability to contribute to mitigating these health disparities. There's a moonshot going on right now in our midst, and it's called telehealth, sparked by the pandemic, and even increasing the bandwidth relative to K through 12, led by Secretary Spearman, Secretary of Education. We can use telehealth like never before. for prevention, but also for early curative medicine and treatment. And I think there's a lot of technology that's needed. I would love to see SCBIO team with its partners to ask how it could contribute, how the businesses in biotech could contribute to this. Let's make South Carolina the best, if you will, the best state in the country for deploying telehealth to mitigate health disparities.
That's very interesting that you talked about that. Our team was just testifying yesterday at the Senate about the fact that telehealth has really come into its own during the pandemic because it forced the use of the technology. Even people who were reluctant or apprehensive had to embrace it, and it's really demonstrated its effectiveness. So thank you all for those observations. So let me as we start to wind down, let me ask you what challenges and opportunities you see for South Carolina. Courtney, would you like to start us?
Sure. I think South Carolina, like so many other places in our country, has unique potential for growth. There are challenges there, so many that we've outlined here. But I think the opportunities for growth are around thinking about these gaps in access to healthcare, particularly in communities of color, how we can strengthen and bolster and really speak to the social determinants of health, where we live, where we work, where we play, and really put some policy structures around there to improve things there, because zip code really shouldn't matter in terms of your access to healthcare. I think Dr. Jenkins raised an excellent point about having a pipeline of physicians. I think that that's one of the issues and one of the challenges around issues of distrust, but an opportunity to really have folks engage in communities, come in communities as professionals, as doctors, as nurses, so that we have these lines of communications open in these communities and folks feel like they see someone like them and they'll be more inclined to take better care of their health, be adherent to Dr. Harris's point, be adherent to their medicines, bring down costs, raise productivity. I think it's a win-win. So I think there are challenges, but there are many opportunities that we could take advantage of and make good use of.
Great observations. Thank you. Dr. Jenkins?
Sure, and thank you, Courtney, for cascading that messaging. I think we need to keep saying it. I will give a shout out as well to Prisma Health and our medical school, in that we've increased our diversity in our incoming class this year to a historic high of 26 out of 108 students. We now have almost 20% across 4 years. That used to be at a 5% low originally. People are surprised that a school in South Carolina can increase diversity, but we did it through intentionality. We did it through partnerships with Prisma Health, with our physicians of color, who help us recruit students, who tell students that we are creating a culture of diversity and inclusivity. And when I talk to students and to the public about what culture means to us, culture is something that you shouldn't have to think about, right, Thornton? It's something that it's like breathing. It's something that you have a value system in, you have a belief in. And so really creating that culture. And for South Carolina, I am so proud of South Carolina in that we are now in the top 10 of vaccine distribution. I think people often look to South Carolina as one of the unhealthiest states, but we have a lot of innovation in this state. We have a lot of opportunity for collaborations, and that force of SCBIO and others who are creating those connections and collaborations are going to really elevate us. And for South Carolina to invest in our talent, we don't want to bleed talent to other states. We don't want to educate and then have people leave our state. We need to retain our physicians, our healthcare providers. We need to retain our biomedical scientists, our researchers, and our industry leaders to be in South Carolina and to really elevate the state the population. And just as Dr. Pastidi said, and Courtney has said as well, is that really when we elevate in these other areas, we will elevate a population, we will increase compliance, increase access, and lower cost for healthcare delivery. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Harris, your thoughts about this question?
Well, just briefly, maybe to come full circle to your very first question, Thornton, about collaboration. You know, South Carolina is a good size. It's well located. It's growing, but yet the crab pot mentality. You know, we are about the size of some big county in Texas, and we can do much better than that. We really can afford to see our neighbor do well. We can afford to, take care of our neighbors a little bit better than we do. We're extremely regional, both politically, geographically. Our health systems need to do better as well, rather than fighting over patients. There are many, many examples of how they are working well together. But the research universities, all universities for that matter, the healthcare system, if we pull together a little bit more, it doesn't have to be a revolution, 5-10% better than we do now, we can make a huge impact. And I'm wearing my green sticker, meaning I was vaccinated yesterday at Prisma, by the way. And that makes me proud. But that's only one example of how South Carolina can be in the lead. And I do believe SCBIO can be a very big part of that.
Well, I agree with you as well. I'll tell you that if I added my own observations, since we're in the middle and early phases of the vaccination effort, the vaccine hesitancy that Courtney and Marjorie talked about is a tremendous opportunity for a partnership approach. We have to convince the people in our state that they can trust this vaccine, and that it is better to take this vaccine than it is to take their chances with a disease that has really made many, many people very, very ill and caused untold death that we could have prevented had we had this vaccine on board earlier. So that's an opportunity, as well as reaching all the geographic corners of this state and all the populations of this state. That can't be done by any single organization or individual. It's going to have to be a partnership. So thank you for that. And Marjorie, to your point about innovation, I saw early on in the pandemic that the Prisma team up in the upstate developed a device called the Vesper device that would allow us to use a ventilator for more than one patient. And that was at a time when we really weren't sure this country had enough ventilators. And so that innovation, that rapid innovation, is a tremendous opportunity. And it was a life sciences kind of approach to solving a problem for the bedside caregivers.
And Thornton, I led the FDA portion of that, and we were able to get emergency authorization for the Vesper device within a few days. I think that spoke well and speaks well to how our FDA has really led as well in approving things that were life-saving at a time without all of the months of delay, which we didn't have at the time. And we met on Saturday. We worked 24-hour days. We had Salesforce involved in that. We had Hewlett-Packard involved in that. We had University of South Carolina, Clemson as well, and Prisma Health, whose doctors really came up with the idea. And I just say, when you look at that collective, right, global companies coming in with academia and with healthcare delivery organizations and systems, that creates innovation and rapid innovation, which is really what we need. So we need to really start having a norm. That rapid innovation is what the expectation is, right? We need a new normal around that.
Right. You're exactly right. And we're going to get the opportunity when it comes to finding communities and finding ways to get in these remote corners of the state to vaccinate. Let me do the kind of the lightning round last question. As we prepare for future pandemics, back to Harris's point, let's not miss the opportunity to learn. Any thoughts on what we can and should learn from COVID-19? Harris, since you threw that out, anything else you want to add that's on the top of your mind?
Well, yeah, I think our audience here should know that the Duke Endowment is sponsoring a South Carolina and North Carolina Institutes of Medicine and Public Health review of what we can learn and what we could do better next time. That will focus on policy, and it will probably take a year. Obviously, we're still in the middle of COVID, but unfortunately, a novel virus will come our way again. And we want our state to be as best prepared as possible. So SCBIO, working with the Institute of Medicine and Public Health, can go a long way. We've got to do better next time, and we will.
Thank you. Courtney?
I think what COVID-19 has taught us is the power of preventive health. So I think what we need to do better going from here is making sure that everybody has equal access to quality health care, and that includes having, those screenings that are so needed, those early screenings that are so needed, making sure people have a medication regimen that they adhere to, making sure they exercise and eat right and do all those things that we've seen, may have a detrimental impact, comorbidities with COVID-19, because I think to everyone's point here, there is another pandemic coming, but if we can shore up those systems and, create ways that people can shore up their own health, we can do better in the long run.
Well said. Marjorie, last word?
Yeah, I think from the top down, from our public servants, our legislators, I know Dr. Fauci was talking early in the pandemic about masking. He was also trying to keep masks for those who really were at the front lines. That was another impetus for his statements in April. We all went to the grocery store and didn't see toilet paper for 3 months. Why is that? There would have been a huge run on PPE as well. I believe that our statesmen, our politicians, our public health officials need to lead with the science. I think always lead with the science, make that your foundation, and really try to understand what Harris has said about once people hear something they want to hear, it is very difficult to turn that off. And so the bastions of social media and digital media, the fear mongering and the misinformation, I think that's a whole nother evolution that needs to happen around accountability in that space, because we still struggle with that, and to the detriment of people losing their lives. I will just say a last word about the numbers of cases that we've had of COVID in the U.S., and we've had now 450,000 deaths. It will be the #1 killer of people in the U.S. And we may get a little numb to that, right? We see the tally, keep driving, but each of those numbers represents someone's family, someone's sister, brother, father, daughter, son, friend. And so I don't know of anyone in my network that has not been affected in some way by COVID. And so I would just say that let's not get numb to this. Let's really take it as a learning opportunity. And when the next pandemic comes, let's take the lessons learned and do better.
Well said. So let me say thank you to the three of you, to Courtney, to President Pastides, to Dean Jenkins. This has been a very rich discussion. I really appreciate the insights that you have brought to the attendees and to not only SCBIO, but also the Hospital Association. In our partnership, we'll continue to work on these issues. And with that, I'm going to go back to Aaron and Sam to wrap up the morning. Thank you all.
Progress. It's in our blood. We've reached for the stars and explored the depths, broken barriers, and cracked codes. But in the world of healthcare, we've been stuck for far too long, chasing symptoms after they appear, treating disease once it's already progressed. But what if the answers have been inside us all along, waiting to be discovered by the next generation of pioneers?
What a fantastic panel to finish our morning with. Power of partnerships is the real fuel for SCBIO and our mission.
That's right, Sam. And while today's programming is about to end, our annual meeting is far from over. For the next 60 minutes, we encourage all of you to visit our virtual exhibit hall to connect with hundreds of life science leaders and companies, and to pack your day with one-on-one partnering meetings tomorrow.
I know my partnering schedule is full, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you again tomorrow for those sessions. Thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Vicor Scientific, and our champion sponsor, Nephron Pharmaceutical, as well as to all the additional sponsors who made this production possible. We offer a very special thank you to our conference chair, Caroline Brown of MUSC, and our co-chair, Karen Davison of the Charleston Regional Development Alliance, and of course, our amazing SCBIO team and incredible board of directors.
Well, it's just you, me, and our video crew here at the beautiful Galliard, and we can't wait for all of you to join us here, live and in person, next year.
So, mark your calendars. We will meet here again in the Galliard's Performance Hall in beautiful Charleston, February 22nd to 24th in 2022. Until then, stay safe. And now it's on to the exhibit hall and getting ready for tomorrow morning's partnering program. From all of us at SCBIO, please stay well and Godspeed.